Who does? Bernard. He has a license.
Jack, I'm sorry, my cord is down.
Yeah,
He'll pinch you.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, it's our
Figured you'd use terminology like that.
convenient places.
I'm fine.
We used to have bars that came like things.
What? All right. Still good? Okay. Staff's good? Okay. All right, we will call this city council special work session to consider a general operating budget for fiscal years 2023-2024 to order at 3:02 p.m. Members present this afternoon are council members CO, Gearbaugh, Rice, Mayor Pro Tem Dillon, and Mayor Morrow. It is our understanding that Mr. Kamir Sulek will be with us momentarily. From city staff, we have City Manager O'Toole, Clerk Royal, Assistant City Manager Getzman, I don't believe is here, Treasurer Cole, Wastewater Superintendent Briggs, DPW Director Searles, Police Chief Radzik, Parks and Rec Director Scruggs. I think Mr. Harrington will be with us momentarily. City Engineer Humphreys is here, along with Program Director, Deputy Parks Director Sunshine Lambert. At this time, the chair would entertain a motion to approve the agenda as submitted, unless there are amendments.
So moved?
As submitted, Mayor Pro Tem Dillon?
Yes.
Is that a second by CO?
Yes, sir.
Thank you, sir. All those in favor of approving the agenda as submitted signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say nay. Ayes have it, the motion carries unanimously. Let's entertain at this time a motion to excuse the absence of our colleague, James Delorco, who will be absent from this afternoon's budget work session.
So moved.
Move to excuse the absence of Councilmember Delorco. Is there a second?
Second.
Seconded by Rice. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, say nay. Ayes have it, the motion carries unanimously. We come now to public comments. Under the Open Meetings Act, any citizen may come forward at this time, make comment or question to City Council. This public comment period will be limited to 3 minutes per person. Anyone who would like to speak is requested but not required to state his or her name and address for the record. Are there any citizen comments from, well, there aren't any individuals in the audience, so I'll defer to the city clerk. Were there any comments emailed to council in advance of this afternoon's budget work session in which the individuals wanted their comments read at this time? Very good. The record will reflect there are no public comments this afternoon. Then we proceed to the first and only discussion item, which is FY24 budget workshop. I think we're going to begin with some opening remarks from the city manager, who I think will subsequently defer to the city treasurer. And then City Manager O'Toole, correct me if I'm wrong, are we just going to go right down the line here, starting with the police chief and ending with Mr. Briggs?
No, we have a, is this one working? We have a presentation that will follow that has each individual. We try to stay in line with the departments as you see them on the budget. We did jump around just a little bit.
Okay, very good.
Are you seeing that presentation yet?
Yes, it's on these two screens. It is not on the screen to my far left or far right. And before you begin, City Manager O'Toole, and I did email my colleagues earlier today, but we do have a hard stop this afternoon or evening at 6 p.m. because Mr. Gearbaugh, myself, the city manager, and city treasurer need to be present at our quarterly LDFA, TIFA, EDC meetings that begin at 6 p.m. So we will keep this to 3 hours. We may take a brief recess at the midway point, but we're going to try to get through as much of the proposed budget this afternoon as possible, mainly focusing on presentations and probably a little bit on your questions and concerns. I think it is likely that we will need to have another session to follow up and address some outstanding issues, but our goal is to get through as much of it today as we possibly can. Of course, in the interim or subsequent to this afternoon's session, if you do have questions or concerns or would like to chat more, please coordinate that through the city manager's office. Unless there are questions for me, I will turn it over to City Manager O'Toole.
Thank you.
Can we expand the presentation to do the full screen? We're just seeing the one little, we're seeing like 3 pages at once on our big monitors.
Problem is it's a PDF. It's not a...
Send it to you as
Can we, is it possible to move these two, if the presentation is on the outside screens, we could probably move those closer as well. It's better. Better, not great, but, yeah. Ben, is it possible to get it on these two screens?
That one worked, and that was where it came for the other presentations, yes.
Okay, very good. Okay. City Manager, please begin.
So I can't see what slide we're on, but,
Just says general fund.
okay. So this should be the outline of the respective funds and department head presenters.
Yep, so it
So
starts with Treasurer Cole, and then it says, it just,
Now we're on general revenue,
yep.
general fund revenues.
Go
Okay.
back to the previous page if you could.
That's fine.
There you go, okay. For your benefit, City Manager O'Toole, it says revenues, Treasurer Cole, General Government, City Manager O'Toole, then transitions to the Police Chief, DPW, Community Development Director, back to the City Manager for Recreation and Culture, and then the Engineer for Engineering and Capital Improvements.
Well, thank you for giving my intro, so we can just turn it over to Treasurer Cole now for revenues.
Good afternoon. Thank you so much, everyone, for coming.
Your mic's down.
Yeah, make sure that mic is pulled as close to you as possible. Make sure the green light is illuminated at the
Really
base.
have to get-
Gotcha. I'm going to make this microphone my new best friend, I guess.
The front of it has to point like right at, so like.
There you go. Can you hear me better now?
Yep.
Okay,
Perfect.
great. First, thank you so much for your time this afternoon and reviewing the budget. We're excited to show you what we've done, the work we've been doing. A special thanks to all the department heads as well. We have put hours of work into the upcoming budget, as well as the projected numbers for this year. I wanted to take a little bit of time and talk about our revenues and kind of note some of the things that we're seeing for this year's budget that are different from prior year. We're seeing an increase in property tax revenue. This is in part due to new development and also increase in market values and additionally for the inflation rate. So those would be contributors towards increasing the property tax revenue. For our state revenue sharing, this year we're going to see a one-time increase of 5% that will go away after fiscal year '24. They have given us an additional 5% just as a normal rate increase. So this will be a one-time year where we get an additional 10% from our revenue sharing. Keep in mind that this year we also recognized our ARPA funds, and there's talk that this is all we're going to see for ARPA, so this is our ARPA funds. Those are included and recognized in this year's budget. We also do have an expected decrease in our permit revenue. We kind of think that there's going to be a little bit of a slowdown in new builds as we're seeing the market kind of settle out, so we have included that in the budget. I'm happy to report that our new investment procedures are already showing us lots of revenue increase, and so we have implemented, or we have incorporated those into the budget. Last thing is that we're getting reimbursement for our SRO officer, and those have also been included in our budget.
Next slide.
It's switching over to PowerPoint.
Yep, no problem. Thank you. So one thing I did want to also note on the revenue side before we transition away from that is, right now, we do have a line item that's dedicated just to identifying the financing gaps that we need as a balancing measure. So the actual amounts will be determined based on what council agrees to or adopts as part of the capital improvement plan. So right now, there's kind of two halves of the equation on the expense and the revenue side that are subject to change based on what projects we end up moving forward with. So general fund, general government, this includes several different line items, but generally speaking, all of the administrative operations of our general fund. We are estimating a 2.5% increase across all full-time positions. Some of that is contractually obligated per union contracts. Some of that is admin staff, and some of that is yet to be determined because we do have some. We have at least one contract that has a wage reopener this year, but that only impacts 2 positions. The actual impact will, as we've adopted previously, be based on the merit adjustments that we have in by position for admin staff. You'll also see new to the general fund this year, we separated out both IT and HR departments to give us better accounting for those respective activities. We'll start tracking IT expenses within that and then billing out to the respective departments. Same with HR. This gives us an opportunity to track all of our fringe costs and things like that within one fund and then allocate those costs out to departments rather than the reverse, which is money coming in individual line items and then being assembled. Last, there'll be increases to a lot of different line items associated with training and professional development. We're seeing that post-COVID, there are fewer virtual opportunities for training, so there's more in-person need for training. And then we have a few staff that are targeting professional certifications this year. And then one issue that I did want to pose to council when we get to the questions section of this is really that same question for council. So the line item associated with council joint meetings and council trainings, there's been some discussion around whether there needs to be any changes to that. So I'd welcome any feedback or input that individual council members have on how that is structured specifically.
And so the question for my colleagues, if I may, City Manager O'Toole, is whether the number that is provided currently is sufficient, or whether more is necessary, or whether the consensus from the group is that the dollar amount that's been provided is excessive.
That, or also the alternative would be to pool all the money together, and then what I've seen other communities do is assign a member of council to attend a meeting. So council says, we have a budget of X for training, council member so-and-so will attend this, this other council member will attend that, just to kind of spread out the representation that our community has across those different opportunities.
Very good. Thank you. Thanks for clarifying.
So next slide is public safety.
Make sure it's right up against your mouth, Chief Radzik.
Test, test.
That's good.
Thank you. The first line item is SRO position included per contract. I know Elle spoke of the revenue side of that. The schools are going to pay 75%, and we will pay 25%. It won't go into effect until August of 2023. The second line item, I think that's the one we were missing a number on. Is that 777? Yes, okay. Better accounting for event-related overtime. That's what we discussed for some of these events during the summer. Looking at our overtime billing, it's really hard, the way we did it previously, to differentiate between what was road patrol overtime and what was like a special contract overtime. So that should be better to decipher the way we're doing it in the line item. The next one is academy sponsorship. We currently, starting in, well, May 8th, we have a candidate that's going to enter the police academy that we are sponsoring. When you look at, you know, police agencies across the board, it's very difficult to hire people at this time. A lot of other agencies are offering incentives, whether it's a signing bonus. I think this is a positive step in the right direction to at least find the right candidate through interviews and backgrounds to sponsor to the academy. And then the increased expenses for body-worn camera and taser contract, we just got the last shipment in for the in-car cameras, and this contract goes till 2027. So they will be installed as soon as an Axon representative comes in to be here for a few days to work with IT and get them installed.
Let's do this, unless you object, City Manager. I'll take maybe 2 or 3 department heads at a time and then do a first round of questions.
We do have a break at the end of the general fund, but really, if you guys feel like that would be more helpful to you, we can do that.
What's the group's preference? Would you rather do everybody at once, or would you rather break it up into smaller groups and do an additional round or 2 of questions?
Rather break it up.
Rather break it up? Anybody else have strong opinions on that? Let me ask our newest council member. Would you prefer to break it up?
Break it up.
Janet, break it up?
break it up.
Okay, very good. All right, so we'll start with, thank you. Anything else you'd like to share, Chief Radzik?
No, sir.
Okay, please transition.
Okay. So now we're transitioning to Public Works.
So we have multiple different accounts and line items being worked on in the general fund for Public Works. We'll go in order as they were written out. Two of the biggest things that you're going to see in this first account called General Building, we have LED lighting and controls and our gate. It needs, well, a major overhaul for both systems. The other stuff is more smaller line items, getting rid of our fluorescent lights, our custodial contract, janitorial services, that's in that first one. The VERF, I did not print that off, I apologize, but that, okay, that's the equipment that you guys authorized us to purchase. In the next one, we're looking at some desks and furniture. We have a lot of changes going on in the organization at Public Works as far as engineering department, where offices are and who's sitting in which spot. So we do have a little bit of money put in for that. It's unusual. You'll see we bumped up quite a bit in catch basin maintenance. The goal there is to do a comprehensive program where we start at a spot, end in a spot. We're taking care of these catch basins before they're collapses, before they're orange barrels, before we're cutting out curbs. We're going to take advantage of some new processes in the industry and some unit pricing, capitalizing from using the county. We also have a lot more needs in identifying weaknesses in our storm sewer. We're going to do a lot more inspection, a lot more investment. Again, we'd like to get ahead of it instead of having sinkholes and collapses in the roads. Spend the money to program out general maintenance. The storm GIS, again, we don't have a very accurate map of what we actually own. So we're going to have to spend a little bit more than we'd like to resource-wise to develop the map and get a full accounting of what assets we have out there, get them assessed by condition, and again, then start doing it in asset management instead of waiting for them to break. Thanks.
Very good.
So do you want to break the questions now?
Yeah, we can do the first two now. I would also request of my colleagues, if you have thoughts on the city manager's comments about the council training or continuing ed budget, I would welcome those. So specifically, whether the dollar amount is sufficient, whether you think it's excessive or needs to be enlarged, and then also your thoughts pertaining to whether it should continue to be individual line items per council members, or whether we could create one larger pot for the entire body. So that's point one. And then additionally, if you have questions for the police, for Police Chief Radzik, regarding her proposed budget, specifically the changes, or DPW Director Searles, we would welcome those. So we'll do an initial round of questions of 5 minutes. I'll begin to my left and end to my right. So Councilmember Rice, you have 5 minutes if you have comments regarding the council continuing ed training budget or questions pertaining to the police department or DPW.
Nothing for continuing ed. I do have some questions that we can do offline, as I'm the newbie and don't know what's available there.
Sure.
So I'll ask offline. One question for Chief Razdick, two questions, actually. What's in the contract for body cams and in-car cams? Are they running the technology as well? Like, what does the contract entail? I wasn't here when you all approved that before.
Gotcha, yes. I can send that to you as well, but
That'd be great.
yes, it's for equipment, training, tasers, in-car video, and licensing for each person.
Okay, perfect, thank you. And then for the academy member, what's their obligation once they've graduated from the academy?
I don't think that we can.
Okay. They don't have to sign like a
No.
one-year contract or anything?
We
Okay.
just hope they will. Which is why I think vetting from the beginning, you don't want to just throw it out there to sponsor just anyone that's going to apply. So we do have a lot of follow-up contact with an individual if they're looking at a sponsorship.
What's your, like, application process for that look like?
They the individual will fill out an application. It's posted on Indeed, but also on the MCOL's website, which is where we get a lot of, because everybody knows if they're entering a police academy or getting ready to graduate, that's where they go to look for who's hiring. It entails an interview, and then they have to have a background investigation, a psychological, and a medical screening.
Have we done these in the past? Have we kept
The
on?
sponsorship?
Yeah, the sponsorship.
Yes, Officer Wright was the first one Saline ever sponsored.
Oh, great, wonderful. Okay.
Just a point of clarification, statutorily, we cannot require that they stay for a specific time. Now, I do know that the legislator is currently considering a rule, I believe up to a year, they would have to repay the cost if they were funded to attend, but we'll see where that lands.
And I do believe we put that in the contract.
Yes, we put in our contract, they would have to repay if they left before 6 months for any type of training.
Gotcha.
And I can note too, because a few of us were part of the process under former Chief Hart to implement a sponsorship program. If we had been legally able to mandate that the employee or prospective employee stay with the organization for a protracted period of time, we would have done that. But to Colleen's point, it's not statutorily permitted, and therefore we were not able to pursue that as an option for conditional employment.
Makes sense. I appreciate that we're supporting that, however, regardless. Those are the only two questions I have at the moment.
Okay, easy enough. Thank you so much. Councilmember Gearbaugh, you have 5 minutes.
Thank you. Some of these are for Treasurer Cole, just to kind of understand where we are at. So when you mentioned the total new revenues, can we get a figure of that in terms of what's going to be the recurring revenue versus what, besides that 5%? I just want to know what in total what that amount's going to be for incremental growth. The other one, and how you've been handling, we've had the number of open positions and whatever. How have you accounted for that turnover savings and such? I don't know if you are using a formula or whatever, just to kind of get an idea of what that is.
We provided to you a wages spreadsheet, and we actually report and account for every single position. Positions that are open, that are determined that we're going to be refilling are included in the budget. Positions that have been requested are also included in that wages document, so it's actually done to the penny by each position.
And, but I mean, how do you account for any open positions? Are you accounting for those as part of like a 98% or anything like that, or 95%?
I speak with the department head and then get approval from Colleen. If it's a position that we're likely going to refill, then we'll budget for it. If it's a position that we're likely not to refill, then it's not budgeted for.
Do you mean like the turnover cost?
Yeah, during the year, so
Yeah.
we have open positions. Occasionally, we do it like with the police department, we had significant positions open, so there
Yeah,
should be
that-
significant savings.
That's going to be accounted for in the HR, the new HR budget that you're going to see, because that's, I mean, really, that was one of the reasons that we felt like we needed to start accounting for HR separately this past year, is we had all these costs associated with listing positions, training for new hires, gear for new hires. So you're going to start seeing some of that in the HR-specific department.
So you
That's
recap-
specifically related to new hires.
Okay. Are you recapturing those savings out of the departments and putting it into the
Yes.
HR department? Okay, thank you. When you mentioned the total budget and training, I'd like to understand how you do the training and the professional development, and if there's any policies or guidelines in terms of how much you're allowed each year for the staff and so forth. In my past, we always had a certain dollar amount that you could spend each year, similar to what we do for council, and determining what is professional versus what's training, and having that, understanding that entire budget across the whole city would be helpful, so that we know
Sure,
what
yeah,
that
we
is.
can pull out all the professional development.
Just to figure out what kind of dollar amount we're
Yeah.
talking about in total. And then as for joint meetings in council, we reduced that budget a number of years ago when more people were actually training. So I don't believe the budget right now is sufficient for training because of the costs and things. And we need to encourage people to go to MML, especially for that kind of training. I think that's helpful.
Do you specifically want to keep it still an individual line item, or would you like one big pool for?
Well, if the one big pool increases it, yeah, because I mean, it is. I haven't gone training because I took a lot of training in the past, but I may want to do that again. But I think, right now, what do we have, $1,000 a person?
Yes, yeah. What we found is some council members are interested in being
Right.
more active or attending more things. There's actually a pretty good spread among council members of the types of events they want to attend. So not everyone wants to attend the same thing. So it might be valuable for councils to put together a list of all the events that it would be worth having a presence at, and then kind of split it up from there.
In the past, we used to have where we would come to council if there wasn't enough dollars or something that council would address, if it was a special, unique situation. So we can even consider that too for that potential. But I would like to see an increase in the budget for that so that it covers the costs that are attributed to inflation or whatever else. The only other ones I mentioned, turnover savings, the academy, is that budget, was that already established for the academy that you're doing, or is that a proposed new just line item that you're going to track it separately? I thought we had established money for academy training in the past.
Yeah, it's just in the regular training line item.
Okay. I just wanted to make it if it was new funds. And then just the other one, when you mentioned the DPW services and such, I would actually like to see what we're going to do more in terms of pothole, street sweeping, those type of things. I'm not sure why we're.
It's not general fund. We're still on general fund.
Local and
Give us
Well,
time.
The reason why I'm seeing dollars, but I'm like, we're repairing the buildings.
Yeah.
And like, if we're putting in new lights for fluorescent lights, I'd like to know what that payback is and the turnovers in that, because when I walk into this building and we have ceiling tiles that are damaged or falling in or mold and all that, I'd rather see that money addressed for that, because fluorescent lighting, I don't know what the payback is on that, but I'd rather have a healthy building versus having some new lighting. So I'm looking at how you're prioritizing those things. So
Sure.
that's it for me. Thank you.
It was almost exactly 5 minutes. Well done. Just a couple things. On the continuing ed training budget for council, I would support your recommendation of making that one large fund for the 7 as opposed to individual funds for each of us. I would additionally concur with Mr. Gearbaugh's assessment that perhaps a modest increase would be appropriate. And I do think there's value in having council sit down sometime in the near future to determine the number of events, which are priorities, and who should attend. Now, some of that has essentially been decided with our annual board and commission appointments. So i.e., although it generally doesn't come at a cost, Mr. CEO and I are the liaisons to SEMCOG. So naturally, we would attend the SEMCOG events. Mayor Pro Tem Dillon is our liaison to MML. So by default, she would be the first to go to MML. But there are a number of other events and seminars, one of which I've spoken to you and I've spoken to Director Scruggs about a number of times. Remind me of the official name of the conference that is in Denver.
It's not an official conference. It's an invitation from Parker CCAT, Ricker CCAT, and they put together something. They invite different communities that are potentially building new facilities or renovating facilities to hear a lot about like the new things that are going on.
Okay. But you can correct me if I'm wrong, that is an annual event.
I think so.
Okay.
I just heard of it. We were invited this June, which we were not.
Right. Okay. But
Actually, if they have it next year, that would be a really good thing.
Well, that was my point. Based on the research that I had done after you and I first spoke about it maybe 2.5 months ago, it seems like it would be very timely and important to not only send a council member, but probably 2 members of your existing staff too. So that underscores the need to bump up and maybe increase that budget, nominally in the upcoming fiscal year. The other statement I would make, and I think it's directed to the police chief and to the city manager, I know there are dollars in this current fiscal year, and I confirmed with the city treasurer on Friday that those dollars are maintained in the subsequent fiscal year, the one we're considering. But I think it is absolutely essential, imperative, that we fast-tracked the hiring and onboarding of a deputy police chief, captain, lieutenant. I could honestly care less what the title is, and it's purely operational in regards to how the police chief defines that position. But we have a number of issues involving the integration of new technology, accreditation, training and supervision, and policy updates that I think would greatly benefit from having a number 2 in that department. So just want to state that for the record, that is a top priority of mine, which is identifying a candidate, bringing that individual on board, and making sure that they have the resources and tools to be successful as a number 2 in the Saline Police Department. With that, I will turn it over to Mayor Pro Tem Dillon for 5 minutes.
Thank you. So I'll start on the council training budget. Since I'm the one that goes over budget every single year, I will say that there's a shortfall there. To be honest, $1,000 is not a realistic number. We just attached that number as an even number. It was not associated with anything. It actually does not even cover the cost of going to the MML convention in and of itself, that one event, and you're beyond your budget. I actually think that we should look very holistically at it. MML has a lot of training opportunities, especially for newly electeds, and we should have a protocol where a newly elected is quasi-required to attend several different trainings. And with that is going to be a cost associated, and so we can build the budget based on that number. I think I spoke to the city manager about this, that I think that we really should think about re-engaging with National League of Cities and having at least a council representative and a staff representative going to that every year. So I think that there's a lot that we should be looking at. So I'd like to kind of really be thoughtful in those dollars, and even if we overshoot it in the next budget, I'd rather have a surplus than have a shortfall and not be able to do things, and we can kind of work through the numbers. I don't know, whatever's easiest on the treasurer's department, if like consolidating it all under one number, breaking it out. I mean, because we're still going to sort of have to break it out anyway, because you don't want one person to take all of the dollars.
Yeah, I mean, from an accounting standpoint, it's going to be easier to have it all in one line item, but I think from like a council governance standpoint, it's probably something that just myself and the mayor can keep an eye on and say, hey, if you guys are getting together and putting together a list of what your targets are for the year, it's going to be pretty clear cut who's doing what and when and how much it's going to cost us. But I expect the first year will be just a little choppy in that transition. But personally, my preference would be we move to just one budget line item and then have a list of what activities we're going to target every year.
Right. The other thing, too, is if there's an opportunity to look at transitioning any of those training costs into the committees that we sit on and sort of kind of doing that, like there are some that I've attended for ZBA that hopefully are getting billed to the ZBA training, not my council training.
Yes, typically if it's linked to a specific committee, it will be that committee's committee-related training budget.
Right. But there are some even within that are general council umbrella, but are sort of more pointed towards a specific topic. So maybe there's a way to sort of funnel those dollars also.
Yeah.
But we can look at that. I don't want to get too caught up in that, but that's sort of where I'm at with that. And then I guess I'd like to sort of understand then does that mirror the staff side of things of what, like, your training budgets are, like, I mean, how do you establish for your staff what those training budgets look like?
So that's exactly the process I follow with my staff is, what training opportunities do you have on the radar for this upcoming year? Do you need to renew any professional certifications or get a certain number of credits this year to maintain professional certifications? And then we add it all together. So like this year, the admin budget includes, for training myself, our IT administrator, our PR generalist, and the assistant city manager all in one budget. But we talk amongst ourselves about what's on our list to make sure we have enough dollars in.
Okay. So I appreciate that. And so we can kind of work through that. So just, I know it's already been talked about, but the academy sponsorship, and I understand what you're saying about that we can't. Do we have any kind of a policy in place about trainings and those dollars expended to employees, especially with education, in what there is the requirement for it? Because, I mean, paying for somebody to go back and get a grad degree for them to leave to get a different job, I don't think is necessarily in the best interest of the city.
So all of our union contracts now have that language about if you receive any sort of training or professional certification support from the city and then leave within 6 months, you have to repay in full. It is tentatively drafted in, every year around June, we update the personnel policies. That's one of the tentative drafts we have for the personnel policy as well, to include that same language. Certainly, for the admin side of things, we don't pay for education. We only pay for professional certifications and trainings. So it wouldn't be an issue on the admin side, just on union staff.
Okay. Okay, thank you. So I guess we keep talking in budgets and meetings and stuff about GIS services and things like that, where are we in that holistic process? Like, are we like 1/3 of the way? Are we like $12 million away?
Well, in just a general statement, we probably have 15 to 20% of an actual GIS platform constructed right now. It has a lot of work to go, but it's already paying us back in time. We have some more training going on at DPW. It's going to be the #1 tool that we use for everything. We just got to get all the attribute data in there. It's fine.
Okay.
I got it.
Yep, that's fine.
GIS it's like, it's something that we'll always be investing in. We have all of these attributes.
It doesn't appear to be working. Pull it closer. Pull it closer.
I broke it on.
Tap it.
Am I too close?
No, you can't be too close.
You can't be too close.
That's better.
Is this better?
Yep.
Okay. I was going to say that GIS is a tool that we're continuously going to be investing in. So there's always going to be an operating budget I envision between $50,000, $100,000 a year. And in addition to getting all of the investment originally to get all of our attributes correct in there. So, and I agree with Larry. I was going to say maybe 10 of what I'm used to using, but it's starting to become a tool I actually use and saves me time after working, after putting a lot of work.
Very good. Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem Dillon. We will certainly have additional rounds of questions. Mr. Seal, you have 5 minutes.
Thank you, Your Honor. Going to the training budget for council, I think that it's wise to probably put it all together. I know there's some things that I go quarterly with the mayor to SEMCOG. I don't know if there's cost related to that or not, but I know this year there was an opportunity to go to a cemetery conference, and I really was thinking about going to that because of my position. I think it's essential probably that Terry goes to it because we lean on her for a lot of the cemetery work, at least Terry. But I would like to go probably next year to pick up on what I don't know. But all I know about the cemetery is you got to be dead to get there.
Yes, my grandpa used to have a joke that people were dying to get in. I would say to council then, I'll set the same standard that we do for staff, which is email me a list of trainings or conferences that you would be interested in attending next fiscal year, and then we can make sure that the budget is built to accurately reflect those opportunities.
Can I, Mr. Seal, this will not detract from your time, excuse me. I do want to follow up, though, on a point that Mayor Pro Tem Dillon made, because it would ultimately impact the dollar amount necessary to maintain a healthy fund relating to council's continuing ed and training. Is there a desire to essentially mandate or compel new members to complete the at least level 1, possibly level 2 of the elected officials academy through MML?
I would say highly recommended that they attend it, yeah.
Okay. Yeah, everybody good with that?
Yeah.
Highly recommended within completing at least a level 1 within your first year, 2 years on council?
First 2 years.
Okay, first term? Okay. All right, very good.
Which, just because
Yeah.
I sit on the board for that, I will tell you is very easy. If you're going to attend the trainings that would be beneficial to you, like the weekend training,
Right.
would get you 8 credits right off the bat.
Right.
So, I mean, it would be a very easy thing it'd be very attainable.
Right.
And that's the thing, where in that first year, you have that, and then if you attend an MML, so you would have a significant experience just to get that acclimation for that first year.
Good, okay. Please, Mr. Seal, I'm sorry, continue.
Thank you, Your Honor. The other questions, the other statement I'd like to make, I guess, is that I support the mayor's position. Excuse me, for an administrative person in the police department. Again, I don't care what rank or what you want to call the position, but having served in that position for many years myself in previous life, I definitely see the value in having a number 2 person in the police department to assist the chief with a number of things that rise to the administrative level in the police department. The other thing I do have are questions about the pay for the training in the police academy. I do wholeheartedly support that. I think it's a very good way to attract and quality candidates to the department. several questions I have. Do we pay for the actual tuition for them to go to the police academy?
Yes, the tuition, any uniforms, and books.
Do we also pay them a wage?
We do, it's lower than what a police officer would.
It's lower than step one in a police contract. Do they accrue seniority while they're there?
No.
Not until they actually come out as a sworn officer and,
Correct.
okay. All right, those are my questions. Thank you, Your Honor.
Very good, thank you. Mr. Commander Sulek, you have 5 minutes.
All right, thank you. So I also support pooling the money together for council's training, and I think it would be easy to increase it by at least 20%. But obviously, we can plan, and I'd rather have more than enough than not enough. I would ditto Mr. CEO's comments on number 2 for the police department. And a general fund question. So our revenues are going up for new developments and for overall taxable values going across all properties in the city for the most part. How is that calculated separately? Well, maybe more importantly, the new developments.
So our assessors go through a process to use other developments in the area to evaluate what the homes are selling for. It's a very complex calculation that's the standard that all assessors use, and so that's what they're using to value those properties.
Okay. It must factor in like the number of developments that a municipality has.
Absolutely, that's certainly a factor.
Okay. So that's a pretty good number. All right. That's really all I have. Thank you.
Very good. Let's do this then, City Manager O'Toole. Not to belabor this point, but I think we have consensus and we can move on now regarding the council training and continuing ed budget. So it seems like there's unanimous support or close to unanimous support of making that one fund as opposed to 7 separate line items in the budget. It seems like there's consensus on increasing that dollar amount. I think before we determine a specific dollar amount, I would recommend that we follow your advice or your request, which is maybe in the next 2 weeks, council members can email you directly in terms of conferences, seminars, training opportunities they hope to attend in the next calendar year. So that would be or next fiscal year rather, beginning July 1 of this year, ending June 30th, 2024, to help us figure out exactly how much that allotment needs to be increased. Okay, please.
Just very quickly to tag onto that, the other question that I keep wondering about is because there could be such quick turnover of people, should we have like sort of a slush fund for a newly elected? Because if I were to use all of my budget this year and not come back in January, per se, then do we have dollars for that new person that would be coming on board? So kind of figuring out whether it's, we build like an extra spot for.
Yeah,
for
we can probably build a little cushion into there, knowing what the elected officials academy costs, at least getting that first like weekender.
Right.
We could budget for one of those a year in the event that we need it.
Okay, that's just the one thing, because I know that when I was looking at this, trying to figure out, because sometimes you see like old council members, but like where's the new council member and does their
Yes.
budget carry over, or how does that work?
Yeah.
So, thank you for that.
Very good. Okay, please continue.
So moving on to community development and building.
Absolutely. So the first item is that we're probably going to experience higher contract staff fees offset by a rental inspection program income. So we are seeing a slight uptick in rental inspections. Just generally, we're launching rental inspections, which will be covered by the fees we collect for those inspections. Additionally, we've also just had some structural changes. We had a code enforcement officer that became a full-time staff member. The next person will now be a contract staff member again, simply because there's not 40 hours a week of code enforcement work to be done within our community. Additionally, another new item that we're presenting going forward is usually how our master plan process has worked, is that we allocate seemingly about $50,000 every 5 years for a master plan update. We were well below budget on that, thankfully, this year. But in general, yes, long-term planning needs to occur every 5 years, but we also need to do other steps in between. So we have a commitment from MEDC via the Redevelopment Ready Communities to fund another half of a downtown design study, which I think will complement the general direction of the master plan very well as another step of implementation of that master plan. So we would go halvesies essentially with RRC on completing that study. So we've budgeted a new item for that, but nothing particularly outlandish. And then we're projected to return to historical levels with the 101, 701, 801, 002 account, which I believe is expenses for site plan reviews. Simply because we had so many with marijuana, we had far more site plan reviews this year than we have had in previous years. And then even so far this year, the primary actions of the Planning Commission have surrounded ordinance reviews as opposed to site plan reviews. So there's a little bit of a change in that. But other than that, pretty much how it has been.
Next slide. So general fund, recreation and culture, this includes a lot of our committees and commissions within it as well, in addition to some more tangible costs related to the maintenance of city assets. So some larger ticket items you'll see in there are building repair needs for Rentschler Farms and the depot. We're also reverting some of the committee and commission budgets back to their historical averages. We know, for example, arts and culture had a large one-time increase for the Bixby Marionettes. That's reverted back. We are asking all of our committees and commissions, simply because we're being extremely cost-conscious this year especially, to look at their budgets again and make sure that what they're requesting has a specific need tied to it and a specific use tied to it. We really want to get away from any sort of mentality around, well, we've got the dollars, why not spend it? And more towards, well, here's the projects we need to accomplish, and here's what it would take us to do that. Last but not least, on general fund, engineering and capital projects.
I don't know. Hello? We're all sharing a microphone now.
Good.
Okay. It is me. It's apparently me. Okay, I'm going to put this one in front of me so I can talk. The first half of the slide on engineering has to do with my department right now, and I think a couple things I've tried to, that I'm excited about with my department is bringing our utilities into the 21st century. Janet, you hit on it a little bit with GIS. That's one of the key tools. Another tool I'd just like to highlight, I was going to highlight today, is the plan room. Anyone who's been downstairs to the plan room, I'm really excited to digitize that. That's a task that when I first started, someone asking me for an as-built, something that should be at my fingertips, could take up to a whole day to go dig through a plan room. And we're getting, now with interns, I would say 40, 50% of our stuff is digitized now, and we're making a lot of progress. So the reason I bring that up is the first couple parts of my slide here have to do with getting the resources to do just that, to continue those things that I'm working on. The first is, on the slide, is the full year of an assistant engineering position. This is reinstating, I think, something that the city had years ago, and that is included, as Colleen said, in the proposed budget. And two, we're looking for an intern for the summer to continue our intern right now. I have no interns, and I miss them. The second has to do with as-needed engineering services, scanning CIP investment with some consulting services. You'll see various line items in the budget that have to do with investment in those tools to transform our capital improvement plan, as we've talked about, to an asset management-based capital improvement plan. We've touched base on the training budget. And then the last part of my touch of the general fund has to do with capital projects. The big projects that you'll see in the general fund are Mill Pond, and I've forgotten the other one. I had it open here. Mill Pond is the big dollar one. So I guess I'll open up to, the storm sewer, thank you. Sorry, the storm sewer, yes. Bring me back. So as Larry touched on, the storm sewer is a very important component of the general fund. And when I rate our infrastructure that we own, storm sewer is third on the list. Wastewater system, wastewater plant, the wastewater collection system, the water distribution system would be the top two, but storm is third on the list. And that is one of the large capital projects, and that includes reinvestment in that, rehabilitation of our storm sewer collection system. And I think that was all that's on my slide.
And this slide is so questions for this half of the general fund.
Yep, so let's start again to my left, ending to my right. You'll have 5 minutes to ask questions of Mr. Harrington, Engineer Humphreys, or City Manager O'Toole regarding the three presentations. So, Councilmember Rice, you may begin.
Mr. Harrington, can you break down the building inspector situation, who we have fully on staff, what we have with contract?
Yes, so currently we have a building official, Steve Maciag, who would be a full-time staff member. We have Danica Katnick, who is our now community development assistant, permit tech, flexible title, essentially. So they are both full-time staff members with benefits. We have Jeff Feldkamp, who is our building mechanical plumbing inspector. Trade inspectors are particularly hard to find. They're particularly hard for a city of our size to have as a full-on staff member, nor is it really in Mr. Feldkamp's own interest to be a staff member because it's so lucrative to be a trade contractor, trade inspector at the moment. There are just not enough of these people. You need professional licenses, you need real work experience, so they're very difficult to find as staff members. So Mr. Feldkamp is a contractor with the city, and then we are currently in negotiations, and I think we'll have a new code enforcement officer also under a contract for about 20 hours a week. So we'll have 2 contractors, 2 full-time employees in the building department, and then myself, which is technically seated in the 700 account versus the 371 account. I realized how that was confusing.
And you said Mr. Feldkamp is working how many hours a week? Is it like as needed?
He's more paid based on inspection than he is paid based on hours, but he does do a variety of assistance around the building department, helping, especially prior to Ms. Katnick's arrival, helping process permits, do plan reviews, things like that. So I don't have that figure off the top of my head of the exact number of hours he works because it's broken up separately based on plan review, inspections, and then general office work.
So when you're budgeting for this, are you budgeting based on what you think you're going to need out of them?
Well, so since Mr. Feldkamp's paid on inspections, it's kind of anticipating the number of permits we're going to get and how many inspections per permit. A lot of that is just based off historic data. So this is what he has, this is what we have been paying to this position prior. This is what we're paying going forward. And then I guess I forgot to add too, the rental inspection is by virtue an extension of the building department effectively. So that's a separate set of contractors through our consulting planning firm, Carlisle Wortman. They have a subsect of their company called CES, or Code Enforcement Services, and that is the group that's assisting with the rental inspections.
Is that already built into our contract with them
The rental inspections?
separately? The rental inspection?
It's a separate Phase 2 agreement we established last November, I believe.
Okay, thank you for that. For the rec and culture committees, I know that we had discussed this at a previous council meeting where we would go back to the committees that we represent or that we are the council representatives on and ask for goals tied to funding. Do you have a date that you would like that information back? Oh, I guess I'm asking this to the treasurer.
We typically adopt our final budget for yeah, so within the next week here,
Okay.
as soon as possible.
Certainly by the end of next week at the very latest, I would say.
Yes, yeah, very much so. We could probably go up to the end of this month, but the sooner the better, because we don't want to stress our treasurer out. We're pretty fond of her.
I know that one of the committees I sat on, we had something else that we were focused on in our last meeting, so I'll shoot that email. Yeah. We might need to bump that, it looks like, yeah. Okay, so I guess I recommend that all council send an email to their respective committees and remind the committees that we need those.
If I may, on that point, real quick, Councilman Rice, especially if your board or commission is more proactive in nature. So no disrespect meant, but that's not an imperative question to ask a planning commission, which is
Sure, yeah.
purely reactive to
Yeah.
the needs of developers, homeowners, property owners, et cetera. So,
Yeah, more the rec and culture
Yep.
type committees. Thank you for that. I think that's all I have at the moment. Thank you very much.
very good. Councilmember Gearbaugh, you have 5 minutes.
Thank you. Ben, I guess the only question I kind of had for you was, you mentioned something about we don't have enough code enforcement to justify a full-time position?
I guess depending on how you want to slice that or how you would like to pursue code enforcement, if you wanted to do something that was really proactive, that was the city's version of an HOA essentially to really ensure to move beyond just complaint-driven code enforcement, then I'm sure we could find 40 hours worth of a week to do of work, but whether that is justified by our budget or by our own standards or how we would like to operate the city, I guess is another question.
Well, I just wondered when you'd mentioned that you used Jeff Feldkamp for other and he's an expensive hire.
Jeff doesn't do code enforcement for us. That would be
I know, I understand that, but I'm talking about the other work that Jeff does for us in terms, you said, helps off in the office with permits and that type of thing. Just, do we pay a separate, different type of fee for Jeff when he does that work versus the inspection fee?
Yeah, so for any office work that Jeff does, whether that's processing permits, and we've really scaled that back. So the way we reorganized the department with online permitting, we trained Danica to be able to process a lot of those really easy permits. I'm just replacing a low voltage outlet. There's no real plan review that's done. The real work is done on the inspection. So we've really scaled back Jeff's involvement on those things simply because it is costly. But when he does that, it's $25 an hour, essentially. So it's well below the cost of a regular staff member.
Got it, good. That, I just wanted to clarify that for you, thanks. The only other thing, do you have sufficient funds to finish up putting whatever online, whatever software, those type of things that you believe will happen in this next year?
Yeah, absolutely. So we already covered the whole bridge essentially with BSNA, with launching things online. We're fixing some issues we have with how we're going to send large plans out for online plan review. So if people start submitting building permits to us, that's the last real hiccup. But we already have the underlying of all that set up in BSNA. It's more coming up with a more coordinated process, both with BSNA and with Carlisle Wortman for those specific large commercial plan reviews and how we're going to handle that. And we get more of them than you would probably guess in terms of how we're going to offload this, gigabyte of plans essentially and email it to somebody else.
And you feel that the public tools and interaction things have improved to a point where you're not feeling the complaints that we had received 6 months or so ago?
Yes, and in fact, we just got a positive feedback from Mitch Road about his most recent interaction with the building department, which I think is kind of indicative. We've really changed the way that we approach some of these processes, and I think that we've been more successful, kind of signposting expectations with businesses and with contractors about, how business is done in Saline. We're holding you to the state standard. This is how you achieve the state standard in a relatively simple and easy to read fashion.
Okay, good. Thank you for that. Rec and Culture, the only thing I want to say, the Historical Society is going to come up with $50,000 to match in terms of helping paint the big barns and the farmhouse. So there's significant money coming in. The only problem that we have with some of these other budgets we've gone through, because we did the study and everything, and I'm just going to say this, is coordination of getting someone to do the work. It's relying on volunteers that may necessarily not be the ones that are owning the buildings. And so we're kind of struggling with that type of oversight. There's things that need to be fixed, but who's doing it, who's coordinating it, just like I'm working with Katrina to try to bid out the price to do the improvements on the farm in terms of painting and so forth. So there's still an issue, even though we have a budget, how to accomplish what's in that budget. And I just want to throw that out there. There isn't a significant investment. We're trying to match as many dollars as we can for that. And then lastly, the engineering. Tasha, can you remind me again, you have yourself, the assistant, and then you're going to continue to have interns?
That is what is in the budget right now, yes. And the intern, the first one I hired was last summer. So I had one intern over the summer, and then I had a part-time intern for the fall and the first part of the winter before I lost them to school. But now's the time to get someone to get back in full-time for the summer.
And it's just a general question. Our intern program has worked really well. We're continuing to get good things. Okay. Just one last statement. If we talk through all of these, I would really like to understand, I think for us, is to determine where all the new personnel are, the total number of new FTEs, because we've been getting feedback from individuals regarding personnel costs. We hear that all the time. Just to understand where have we invested our monies, why are we doing this, and what is the cost of doing that? Because when we compare ourselves to other communities, there may be a concern there. But that's just a general statement right now.
Sure.
Very good. Two things real quick. One is a statement, one's more of a question. Mr. Gearbutt touched on part-time versus full-time code enforcement. I understand from reviewing the documents that were provided to council and based upon a recent conversation I had this past Friday with the city treasurer, this is a pretty lean budget. I don't think there's any way to, I don't think it would be fair to categorize it in any other way. It is a balanced budget, and what was proposed invests in the things that our citizens value most. I do think, so that being said, I support the recommendation for the upcoming fiscal year to maintain the code enforcement position as a 20-hour-a-week contract. But moving forward, as funds become available, I would be an advocate for reestablishing that as a full-time position within the Community Development Department. My tenure as mayor and a council member dates back to the early months of 2009 to the present. And when I started, we had a full-time code enforcement officer. Initially, it was Joe Myra, then it was Belinda Kingsley. Because of the Great Recession and because the city was in a very precarious position financially in 2009, 2010, that position was eliminated and then reestablished on a part-time basis. And while part-time is better than having people fill in, it is still not as good as having a full-time FTE. And that gets back to a point that you raised, which is having somebody is great, but having somebody 40 hours a week in the office allows you to be much more proactive and catch a lot of the things that slip through the cracks. So I just want to state that for the record. The other item, and this is my question, Ben, are there dollars in the proposed 2023-2024 budget to begin the process of evaluating and reviewing existing site plans? That's been an issue that I've been passionate about, I guess, for lack of a better way to articulate it, for a number of years. And I would very much like to see some progress made on that front.
Yeah, so there are no direct dollars. I understand the general initiative with that, but I think it's something that warrants a more thorough, potentially even a work meeting on, because how we choose which site plans to review, which site plans not to review, who's doing that review. I mean, essentially, I'm qualified to do it. So if we were really just trying to find discrepancies based on what was planned and what was there, it falls under my salary because I'm capable of doing that. I'm capable of then directing the code enforcement officer to follow up with the site plan discrepancy. So that's something we can do. I think that'd be a very costly thing to send to Carlisle Wortman or CES, because they're going to be sitting through site plans and then looking at aerials and trying to find discrepancies, or they're going to pay somebody to come out here in a car, which then adds cost back to the city.
Right.
So we can absolutely begin that process, but I definitely need more direction, because I'm not exactly specifically sure which site plans you're interested in reviewing. And then there's this other third legal component to it as well, where some of the concerns that you've all identified, such as dead vegetation, whether or not that necessarily falls within the city's ability to bring back to conformity to a site plan that was approved 5 to 10 years ago, is a wholly different question that we have to broach with our attorney.
Okay, fair enough. Let me tell you my perspective, and then I'll maybe you and I and Mr. Gearbuck can chat offline, or at a minimum broach this at an upcoming planning commission meeting, because I think that's probably the place to begin a focused discussion on this topic. As I think of existing approved site plans and those that are sort of low-hanging fruit for review and evaluation, I'd be looking at large commercial or industrial developments, and I would be focusing on lighting, vegetation, stormwater management, aesthetics, et cetera. But, we can cut this round, we can cut this flat. I mean, there's a number of different ways to approach it. And if you have ideas that are different from mine and it still accomplishes the goal, that's great. But I do think that we owe it to ourselves and the residents of this community to review those existing, to review the approved site plans, to ensure that property owners are in compliance with the agreements that were mutually, the agreements that were approved by city agencies.
Absolutely.
I'd just say, if we can build a project plan based on whatever efforts you can identify in terms of percentage to then back into it to see how much you can accomplish within the time that you have available, I think the three of us can work out some standards and then bring that to Planning Commission.
Absolutely.
Very good. Thank you both. Mayor Pro Tem Dillon, you have 5 minutes.
Thank you. So at some point, I think I'll just put it out there. I'm going to probably connect with each of you, because I appreciate that we're going through the little thing. I have line items, some questions about things that I just don't understand, that I just want some clarification. But big picture, for probably Mr. Searles, and it's going to probably be an across-the-board thing, I think it's great that we're implementing all of this new software and such. I want to make sure we're utilizing it and maximizing it. And that's the piece that I feel like sometimes we don't close the loop on. So I guess I want to make sure that there's enough dollars put into the budgets, and that's on your side of the wall to figure out, to make sure your staff is trained and that they are absolutely utilizing the equipment that we have for them. because it seems like we've done things, but then nobody knows how to actually use them, or they're not being used because people choose not to use them. I just think that we all need to be on the same page about that. If we're going to make that investment into things like GIS, we have to be able to utilize it. So for Mr. Harrington, I like that you talked about your redevelopment-ready communities downtown study. That's great. If you look in the council office or probably down in your thing, we have piles of studies that we've done over the years that just become stagnant and obsolete. So I'm concerned with spending money on doing another study that we're not going to implement. And I will go back to our parking study and some of our other studies that we have done in recent years that we've never actually done anything with. And so we spend dollars, we get great advice, and then we don't take it, and we don't advance the projects. So I just want to be mindful of that when we're in a budget time when we don't have necessarily the dollars. It's always great when you can find somebody to match your dollars and, share the cost. But I guess understanding what's our short-term and long-term goal with doing a study.
Yeah, absolutely. Implementation is paramount to me. What's the point of spending money and doing any of the things that we do if we're not going to find a way to actually, to your point, close the loop or finish it out? So absolutely. And literally part of the master plan implementation is likely going to involve further study and further creative uses for our downtown. The last downtown study that was occurred was in 2007, done by an architecture firm called Quinn Evans. I found out a couple months ago that our consultant planner, who was the same consultant planner at the time, had zero involvement in it. So in terms of like setting yourself up for failure, there was never really the intention in my mind to close the loop if you're not bringing the practical component of planning and zoning and future looking in with that study that was done. So we would absolutely involve Carlisle Wortman. This time they have landscape architects on staff who would likely be some of the people that we consult with this. OHM also has a pretty robust planning department. So we could bid it out to one of those two entities. But, fundamentally, my goal of this is to come up with price tag options for the community. What would it look like to infill a parking lot? What would it look like to add new parking? What would it look like to add, permanent structures that would, serve the farmer's market or things like that, and have a price associated with it? Because I think that's another fault of the city's past, not fault necessarily, but maybe misstep, is not really knowing how much these items cost out of a study. So we have this great idea. It looks great on paper, but then how much does it cost to implement? And that's where things start to fall off. So knowing we have a price tag, knowing we have a vision, I think all those things will make these studies far more practical going forward than the ones that maybe have been done previously.
Okay, I appreciate that, thank you. And then just a couple of really quick ones that I had in here. Sorry. Here's a general question that I have. Is it at all possible in our budget packets to have a last line that shows like percentage increase, like the up, down arrows or anything like that, so we can sort of understand? I mean, you can look across the board, but sometimes it's really difficult because if you're moving something to a different fund, there's a huge jump, or it went 0, 0, 0, $800,000 kind of a thing. And it's sort of like, wow, where did that come from? And I know that you've got like memo lines that sort of explain some of that, but just for a really quick, like cursory look at something and say, hey, look, this is where we're up in this range, or we're down in this, and sort of be able to see it a little bit better. Because it's a little overwhelming, I'll be honest, when I look at like salaries, because like for DPW, they're spread out among X amount of groups. So it's really hard to tell what exactly that means. And I think Mr. Gearbaugh mentioned about that, is sort of just understanding where do we stand with salaries, where are they up to, what are they, what is our budget looking like as far as in that pie, how much is taking up, like more of a dashboard look. And then I'll just end by asking one last question, and is that I'd love to see a line item come back. I don't remember seeing it in here. If it was, I apologize. Trees. We had a little momentum a couple years ago. We planted a lot of trees. We've lost a lot of trees again, and so I don't know whether or not we're going to go back to having a line item for them.
We have one. We have a line item for it. We had one last year. I'm not sure prior to that. Right now, what we have budgeted for tree replacement is probably the maximum at our staff size we can plant in a year.
We used to
Right.
try to match it with DDE funds too, so I don't know if we're still doing that.
What's the dollar amount?
About, I believe, between it's either 6,000 or 7,500. About 30 trees.
Very good.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank
And
you.
we do have some, I'm sorry, we do have some that are replaced as part of projects. That doesn't count against our normal
Right.
budget.
No, we used to leverage, DTE used to have a grant project. I don't know if we're still doing that or not. I don't know if they still offer it.
Okay. Mr. Seal, you have 5 minutes?
Thank you, Your Honor. Mr. Searles, keep the microphone there. How many FTEs do you have now?
13? That was question statement. 14.
Okay, those are actual onboard, not just positions in the,
Full-time employees in, all of our positions in the budget are filled.
they are. How many would be an ideal number of FTEs?
Always more, but we gotta do it sustainably, I think. I want to see what happens as we start improving the tools in our hands and our ability to leverage technology and make sure that we're not overdoing it as well. I think we've got some efficiencies coming with our improved GIS and every guy having it in their hands and available. There's not as much running back and forth, not as much need to run back and forth to the yard to look for things.
Okay, good answer. Tesha, where do you get your interns?
Local colleges. Local colleges. So the one for the fall, we advertised a little later, so we only got a few applicants for, but right now we're advertising, and I think Handshake, I hear, is a familiar thing for younger. That's what we advertise on there, but most of them are just directly through U of M, Eastern, Washtenaw Community College.
Okay, do you pay your interns while they're here working?
Yes.
Okay, you ought to get together with her and figure out how that works. Police department, we never paid for interns. When I was there, they always called us, begging us to take on students as interns. So I don't know if there's any opportunity for you to be able to do that as well with any of the engineering schools like at U of M or anything.
I love engineering students. I would say these are probably my 9th and 10th interns over my career, and they're great. They're great. They come focused and ready to work.
Okay.
And they're better with technology than myself, which is even better.
That's true. Okay, thank you. That's all I have, Your Honor.
Very good. Just to follow up on that, Director Searles, perhaps you can remind me, I think going back to 2020, maybe right at the point of the pandemic, I think DPW is up 2 employees? Okay, all right. And then the staff can correct me if I'm wrong, but I know I'm not. In internships today in 2023, I think we're moving rapidly in the direction of just about everybody is paid or provided some level of
Yes,
compensation.
we no longer offer any unpaid internships.
Okay.
I think that's unconscionable.
Yep. Okay. And I think most progressive organizations probably moved in that direction about 5 years ago, and those that are not, I think, are rapidly embracing that
Yes,
approach.
and-
One, we struggle to find full-time employees. So
And we have seen incredible things accomplished by the interns who work in various departments within our organization.
very good. Okay, thank you. Mr. Commissioner Sulek, you have 5 minutes.
Okay, I won't take 5 minutes. Just for clarification, Tessa, do you have the assistant engineer, or that is planned for next year?
That is currently, yes, it's planned starting in next year's budget, so July 1st it's planned for. And there is a current job description that's getting updated right now by Elle, but it's in the works of, yes, getting updated and reposted on the website.
Okay, and if you can get 2 interns for the summer, would you do that?
Absolutely.
Okay, 3.
Then we can help also with, because one of the things we've done in the plan room is we've tackled everything that's what I consider ours. The as-builts for the infrastructure is being engineering, but there's a lot of not ours, plats and buildings and other departments. And so there's huge piles of plans down there that need additional processing. And a second intern would help a lot with just getting those other departments digitized also, the things that are probably lower hanging fruit for those departments, but we've got them somewhat organized now. Let's keep the momentum going and get it done.
Okay, great. And then, I don't know if this really will factor in, but the hotel, when is it slated to be finished? I mean, we're looking at that not having an impact for a couple more years. I mean, there's going to be some tax revenue coming from it.
Yeah, even if it's finished this year, which in all likelihood it will be, it won't, the assessed value won't occur until the end of this year and then hit next year.
They did pay a pretty large permit fee as a result of renewing all their permits and getting new permits for the hotel. So we did see some economic benefit from the hotel being bought and the
Right.
permits being reopened.
Right. And they're caught up with their anything outstanding then. Okay. My other questions have been answered. Thank you.
Very good. Do you want to continue? Want to take a few minutes?
So I just real quick to close out, or before we close out general fund, one of the things that I want to note is that this budget is only balanced through the use of fund balance, which, as we know, is not a sustainable trajectory for us. So there does need to be consideration from council. Staff can't make this decision in a vacuum about costs that will need to be saved in fiscal year '24. We've already talked about some of those cost-saving measures. Treasurer Cole and I have presented to council, but tentatively, we have about $270,000 that would be coming out of fund balance if we change nothing about this budget today. And there are some of those items that we just left as status quo because we need council direction on what we're going to do, for example, about dispatch services, about our contract services, whether we want to pursue paid parking downtown, all of the things that you saw still outstanding in that cost-benefit presentation. So the more that we can do to hear from you about those items moving forward, that would be very much appreciated. The other thing that we would like to pose to council is the budget is also balanced through offsetting, as I mentioned at the beginning, offsetting loan proceeds and costs associated with capital projects. There's about $940,000 in this current budget from just the grade 4 and 5 defect project, the Taft Court Tennis Park project, and the Mill Park romp structure project. That would be for FY24 alone. There's some additional costs that we'll talk about in 591. But then moving forward, there's also another $1.6 million in what we're calling needs, which is just those items that haven't necessarily made it into this budget, but are in our capital project, and we need to kind of time when they're going to occur. So we'll talk more about that when we get into the capital improvement plan, which will be at our next meeting. But things to keep on your mind as we're finalizing a budget. Staff will need direction ultimately on what cost-saving measures or revenue-generating measures you want us to include in this budget.
When do you expect, because I know this has been a topic of discussion at the City of Saline, Saline Main Street Working Group, which consists of yourself, Mr. Gearbaugh, and Ms. Rice from council, and then the Managing Director of Saline Main Street, Rebecca Schneider, and the proprietor of Rock, Paper, Scissors. When do you think you'll have a recommendation, a fine-tuned recommendation on paid parking downtown?
So their board is supposed to meet tomorrow night and discuss some parameters that Treasurer Cole and I provided to them about what a program like that could look like. I would expect we have our next meeting with them on, is it Wednesday or Thursday of this week? Or is it
So
next week?
Is
But-
it reasonable to suggest that perhaps council could begin discussion on that topic at either our first or second meeting in May?
Yes, absolutely, our first meeting in May.
Okay. And then as it relates to consolidating with Metro Dispatch, we are waiting for a contract from Metro Dispatch and a transition plan, is that correct?
Correct. We have, Chief Radzik and I have a meeting with Metro Dispatch on April 18th to start talking about the scope of services.
Okay. So again, maybe shoot for that first meeting in May then to zero in on, does that sound reasonable to you? Okay. To you as well, City
Yep,
Manager?
absolutely.
Okay, very good. Any quick questions, or do you want to take a break then?
Yeah, we can take a break as we transition to the next.
Okay, yep.
Quick statement on that when you mentioned it. The only thing I'd like to look at, and when we talk about it, a full review of our fees. I don't know how long, I don't believe our fees are, unless you've reviewed all that in terms of developers and all that, to make sure that that's accurate. You may have, I'm just saying that's one of my things I look at. And then the other one, I want to talk about cost recovery, including the fire department. Okay, thank you.
I have a quick question.
You real quick, you want to make a statement on the fees?
Yeah, so we are in process right now of doing a thorough review of all of our fees, making sure that the fees are enough to cover the costs that we incur to provide the services. So that should be done within the next 30 to 60 days.
And to jump off, I actually just signed a piece of paper today that's a new way that we'll be doing planning fees and escrow amounts for engineering reviews. So I think that it's far more documented, far more obvious to everyone involved about who's spending what on what, and to make sure that we recoup. And then Tesh and I have also been working on engineering review standards, which add an additional layer of review, post-planning, pre-construction, similar to a lot of the site plan comments you've all had about utilities and things like that. It's another way to kind of bridge those divides and capture that to make sure that we're not spending more money down the road to achieve compliance again.
My hope is that we do the fees that are justified for the large developers in those programs, not necessarily dinging the individual one doing it, but those big projects that where we put a lot of effort and money into should be paid for them, not being subsidized by the taxpayer. So, thank you.
Real quick, Ms. Rice?
The chunk here in the budget for E911 dispatch, this 172,657, is that your total estimate for what dispatch will cost next year?
No, if council was provided on last week, I don't know if it's Thursday or Friday, an estimate of just wages and fringe costs associated with dispatch. So unfortunately, for budgeting purposes, the city has historically always blended dispatch cost in with the police department cost. So the wages are shown in that line item. But it's easy enough for us, based on the staff that we have and the positions that are available, to pull that out. That total of just staff cost, what was it, about $370,000?
High 300s.
I can pull it up real
What
quick.
was
just
that
so.
sent to us in? Sorry, I was on vacation last week. Was that the manager memo?
Yes.
Okay, got it. Yep, I see it.
That was actually sent on Friday, excuse me.
Got
I said
it.
Thursday.
Yep, perfect. Okay, thank you very much. I skimmed over that. I apologize.
Yep, no problem.
All right, let's do a 5-minute recess. We will convene promptly at 4:30. So if you'd like to grab something to eat, get a drink, go to the restroom, please do so. order, and I will again turn it over to City Manager O'Toole.
So for the next section, we're going to focus on the Recreation Complex Fund. We'll have Director Scruggs to talk about the revenue and expense sides.
Hello, everyone.
Perfect. So you take as much time as you want, Carla, and then when you are done, if Deputy Director Lambert would like to share a few remarks, we would welcome that, and then we will do a round of questions.
Yeah, I offered if she has something that I've forgotten, just jump in and add. So we have a couple of things. We're looking at first revenues and kind of some of the notable things that are coming up for this next fiscal year. As you might recall, the Rec Task Force had recommended every year implementing membership increase over the years. This past year, 22 to 23, we actually went a little bit above what we had anticipated because of all the inflationary costs and whatnot. So we had a 6% membership increase starting in January. We have scheduled in this budget 1.5% increase for our membership. And I think as we get a little bit closer into the fall, we can adjust if necessary. But I think, as we're, moving in that direction right now, we're definitely doing a lot better as far as memberships. We're up about 250 membership packages over last year. So we're definitely moving in a better direction, kind of getting more towards those pre-pandemic levels. Building rentals, we have, this fiscal year, we're definitely projected a lot more than what we were in the past. We do have some of the sale of that fitness equipment that we had last fall, like August through October. We sold, the different equipment from the cardio room that was replaced with the equipment that we purchased through our grants. Next fiscal year, we're budgeted a little bit less than what we are right now. So that's the difference in if you look across the board, like this year we're expected 20,000, next year we're lower than that. Park rental fees, actually this January we had talked with DPW regarding them taking on the park rental, the actual applications and managing the park rentals and accepting all the revenues for that, because essentially they were doing all the work and getting the prep and whatnot. So we've made that transition. I don't think that was on the notable changes for DPW, but they do have a revenue line now for those park rentals. We do still take in dollars for the program rentals that we do, like with My Life on our sand volleyball courts. We do some soccer rentals with Hot Shots. Is that what it's called? Soccer Shots. We do some work with other people renting the tennis courts and so on and so forth. Personal training revenues are definitely down. We actually, this month, we're just now starting back with our personal trainers. We have 4 on board now, and we're starting to advertise that and get people back into that mode of hiring personal trainers and working through that program. So we will have to adjust our budget for next fiscal year as we progress and that program kind of builds its way back up. We're definitely having continued growth in our swim lessons. I went through our numbers today. We are up 388% over last year at this time. We went from 26,000, actually we were 27,000 as of this time last year. Currently, we've brought in over 105,000 in swim lesson revenues. So a huge shout out to our new aquatic manager, Sarah Zietlow, in hiring and getting those programs back up and going. We're definitely at those pre-pandemic levels with our swim lessons. Same with birthday parties. We're up about 250% over last year. Last year at this time, we have brought in about $10,000. We're already at $25,000 right now, which is above where we had anticipated last year when we put this budget together. That I see as a big kudos to our rec manager, Sarah Ferguson. She's gotten a lot more creative with the opportunities for birthday parties, incorporating Lego parties, Mario Kart parties, which is our latest birthday party that we offer, which is life-size. You actually play Mario Kart in the gym, which is a pretty cool.
You play Mario Kart or card?
Kart. Mario Kart, which is a video game. I know, it's hilarious. Mario Kart is a video game, but she's created it so it's a in-person, you're on carts and you're getting mushrooms and going through tubes.
There's all types of coins. It's kind of a race. There's all types of obstacles. And yes, you're on scooters, which are your carts, and it's very bright and colorful and fun.
Yeah.
Adults, too?
We could definitely have an adult party, not a problem. So, yeah, so she's really doing a great job with all of our special events. We're definitely having a great demand for our kids' camp. In fact, last Monday, we started our registration for this summer's program, and in 5 minutes, 10 minutes, the whole system crashed.
It was about 2 minutes after we opened it up that the first email started coming in. So yeah, it definitely shut down the entire system.
And at this point, I think I'm not sure where we're at right now.
Yeah, so we're sold out on all of our full week-long registrations. We probably have about 10 to 15% of our single-day registrations remaining. Those are scattered throughout the summer. Some of them are, I would say, weighing heavily on Fridays, which are the least desirable days. A lot of people take long weekends throughout the summer. So, yeah, it was definitely a very popular program, and we have long wait lists right now.
And we've exceeded our projected number already for this summer, or for this fiscal year. So we're definitely moving in a more forward direction. And then, I think the biggest thing to say regarding our revenues is we're expecting to have a decrease in the amount of general fund contribution. I think it's just shy of $25,000 for general fund contribution towards the next year's fiscal year budget. Then regarding expenses, just a couple of things. I think this goes for everyone, but we're moving into the fiber rather than, like, our server actually blew up and we no longer have a server, the last power outage that we had. So we're connected to the City Hall server, but eventually, I'm hoping in the next month or two, we'll be connected to the fiber network and we'll be able to run a lot faster than what we currently are. But with that, there are a lot of new annual fees, like all the subscriptions, I guess, that we have, like with the Microsoft and the Office and Rec Pro and, our payroll services and things like that. So those are kind of new fees for us that are on the expense side. Increased publication costs, that's for our it's not a quarterly brochure. We do 3 brochures a year. But actually, a couple weeks ago, we've been exploring the idea or just trying to figure out how to cut costs regarding postage and whatnot. We've worked with Community Ed to see if it's possible to do a joint brochure where one would be faced one way, one would be the other way, but, it would be a cost savings for all of us, with printing and the postage, which the postage is what's the most expensive for all of us. So we're hoping to get those numbers and see, what the realistic timeline for doing that. Potentially this fall, we could have a joint brochure and at least try it, see if that works and whatnot. New custodial contract, definitely that and our guaranteed, or our, what's it called? The general maintenance, yeah. Those are, we have some cost increase with that. Our portion for the custodial, we're looking at we had a 25% increase, so we've adjusted the budget accordingly. And then I believe we're taking in our RFPs mid-week, next week. So we'll have some more numbers for that. And then other things, projects to be completed, if funding is available, we have on the docket, we have some ADA doors that are in need of repair. And we want to add some additional ADA door openers, like for our locker rooms. We have quite a few people that come in with, have mobility issues, whether they're in a wheelchair or a walker. But it's just a lot more convenient for them to hit that button so that the door can open for them and they can get through without scraping the doors up or battling with the door to keep it open. Also, our security and fire alarm, which is, we have to arm our building because we have a pool. That is in dire need of replacement. It's out of date. We can't add or delete users any longer, and we really need to get that updated, I'm sorry. And then also door replacement. We have several doors that are in need of replacement just from abuse and, getting banged on and whatnot. And also LED lights is another one that we feel is necessary. We have some lights in the pool that need to be replaced, but we really need to take a look at light placement in the pool area, moving to LEDs, getting all those high bays in the gym, in the pool, and in our racquetball court switched over to LED. That would be a significant cost savings. Plus, we can have controls where we can control them being on and off, do some light harvesting so that we can generate some of that energy to use in the evening time and whatnot. And then also other projects that are delayed, depending on our funding and finances, would be our pool deck replacement and also window replacement in the pool area. We have several that those thermal panes have been, the thermal pane is broken, so you get that cloudy effect or like water on the inside. But that's just something that needs to be taken care of as money is available.
Okay, very good.
Yep.
The only thing I was going to add to that is just kind of to summarize, we've seen some nice steady growth, especially over the past year with our memberships as well as our programs. So that's been led to some optimism. I think one area that we're still struggling is our staffing. We've been fortunate, we're fully staffed in terms of full-time staff, which has made a big difference to have a full-time, aquatic manager, having a facility manager. But we still struggle to recruit part-time staff, and I think, I think we could take some things a little bit further if we just had more, more ability to have those instructors, camp counselors, things like that, so.
You spoke a little bit at the top of your presentation, Director Scruggs, about membership numbers or membership packages. Do you have a number of how many membership packages we have to date?
Yes.
That's all right.
I think currently, and this is after this, at the end of March, so I don't have my April numbers, we've sold 1,464.
Okay.
And last year at this same exact time, hold on.
So that's March of 2023.
Yeah.
What you're looking up now is March of 2022.
Yep, March of 2022. We were at 2,100. So we're up about 250 as of right now.
Can you say those again? I thought you said,
Yeah, no,
I thought you said 1,400.
I'm sorry. Yeah. We're 1,200.
not 2,100.
1,200.
Okay.
So we're 1,200 in 2022.
1,200 in 2021.
1,400 in this year.
Yeah,
For 2022.
you're about 264. And then, do you have, by chance, what was the high, either late 19 or early 2020, immediately preceding the pandemic?
We were at 1,800. So March of 20, we had 1,800 memberships.
Okay. So we're a little,
So we're still down. However, you have to take into consideration coming back, we have more, we're charging more than what we did back then. So,
Well, and it's also important to look at the trajectory of where are we today from when the rec center opened in July or August of 2020?
sure. The other thing to consider too is, that time, a lot of people reflected on their memberships and do we need this? They've found a lot of other opportunity, whether it be at home or they're just moved. I mean, a lot of people moved out of this area, kind of took a look at their finances to figure if this is something that they really want. So I definitely we're on the right projection.
Yep, good, okay. Thank you. Deputy Director Lambert, anything else you'd like to add?
No, I think
Okay.
that's it.
Easy enough, then we'll do a round of questions. I'll start with Councilmember Rice. You'll have 5 minutes.
Do you, so I saw a line in here that talked about all of the previous years you had grant funding for different things. Do you foresee anything in the near future? Any types of grants that are available that you could be applying for?
Sure. In fact, we just, the CARES Board met last week, and we were awarded 4 grants, one for Rec on the Go. So they've had 2 rounds this year already. So first round, we got $1,000 for Rec on the Go, plus they've added another 700. So I think we have 1,700 right now for Rec on the Go for the summer. We're still seeking, we need about, how much more? About $6,000
About 6,000
more
more, yeah.
for our Rec on the Go program this summer. We received $1,200 for a safety enhancement grant, which is you probably don't know this, but we have what's called a safety turtle. And our lifeguards on their tubes, there's like a little, it looks like a little beeper or a little pedometer. But if that gets wet, an alarm goes off in the pool area and in our front desk. It is so loud and ear-piercing. But it indicates to us that someone is in the water, our lifeguard's in the water, something's happening. And we automatically just run back there. It's a wonderful safety feature.
It was implemented last week when one of our guards went in, an older customer slipped and, just her foot gave out while she was trying to get into the pool, and he was guarding by himself. So he quickly responded, and with that safety turtle going off, we had 3 staff, myself, Jan, and Brian, all within that pool area within probably 15 to 20 seconds. We were able to respond and give him assistance. So
the safety turtle is no longer available. They don't make it any longer, so we had to investigate a new system, and our new aquatic manager found something that will work in its place when our safety turtle gives out. Because you only have so many of these little receivers, and if they break, then we don't have replacement, or we can't get them. So CARES is sponsoring us to get this new system, which will be wonderful as soon as that safety turtle gives out. The other one is for parks. We received a total of 13, let me see, the first round we got 3,800, the second round was like 7,400 for wayfinding signs for our park. So we now have, we'll have signs for the rest of our parks, Risden, Colony, Stonecliff, and Teft at Textile Road. So that will be the rest of all the parks being signed. Plus now we can replace all the rule signs and kind of point people in directions for trails and whatnot. And then also we received $15,000 for the tennis courts, for the resurfacing of the Teft Park tennis courts. And then we're going to be applying again. They have a third round, and we've identified some other internal ADA doors. We're going to be applying for that through CARES. There's some other programs that we'll be applying for and some other enhancements and stuff. So we try to take advantage of all the CARES money that we can, which is our school district money. And then we have received a few foundation grants through the Reddy's Foundation for the tennis court to repair those, and some other internal, like waste management. They sponsor a few programs and some other things like that.
Great, I appreciate that. Thanks for that info. No, it's super helpful. I think it's really important for not only us, but for the public to understand that y'all are working on getting those external grants and funds. So thank you for that. I think that was the only question I have. I think sitting on the Parks and Recs board, I've gotten a better view of how y'all operate. So I think I can bring any additional questions to you personally. But I think that's it for the public.
Very good. Thank you, Councilmember Rice. Mr. Gearbow, you have 5 minutes.
Thank you. Actually, these will probably be more numbers for Treasurer Cole to answer for me. I'm looking at the budgeted revenues and so forth. Looking at last year's projection versus the projection for 2024, we're down about $100,000 in revenue, even though it looks like projected we're going to be up $100,000. Why are we going down in total revenues in 2024?
What line item are you specifically indicating?
If I look in the grand total, if you look at page 70, the grand total I was looking at, trying to understand, we had fee increases and some other things. I know there's some one-time monies in there and everything, but if we're projecting 1.758, we're down $100,000 in revenues.
That is due to the one-time funding that Rec Center received in the prior year from general fund.
And then the other piece, if I'm reading this correctly, we're still looking at using approximately $164,000 of fund balance to make up the difference. So that will be an ongoing, I'm looking at 2025, that there's going to be a significant deficit. I'm looking at the last page, 73, I guess it is. And it shows available balance and then projected 2023 that will only have $25,696 available for assigned fund balance. I guess I'm looking at the numbers, just trying to understand what I would like to see as a 3-year projection. Because this clearly indicates that even though we may have numbers coming back, we've got a structural deficit problem, even though we moved a lot of money off of here and moved expenses over onto the general fund. The other concern, you mentioned that, with the number of memberships coming on, how did the impact of Planet Fitness happen? And this may be a question for you. We haven't noticed anything at this point? Okay, that's good to hear. Yeah, that's just my thing, is looking at that. I see that there's still an issue of $165,000 going forward, and we're continuing to put in the debt service. And if we're talking about all these improvements, there is not funding for those improvements.
Correct.
Especially if we have a structural shortfall related to a number of other projects that are going on at this point.
That's correct.
Okay, thank you.
Nothing else, Mr. Gearbow?
Nope.
Very good. Councilmember Dillon, Mayor Pro Tem Dillon, you have 5 minutes.
Thank you. I just wanted to touch back on, we talked about staffing and understanding whether you were short on staffing or there was, and I apologize because I have a really cryptic note here. I guess what I'm trying to figure out is wages and where you stand, if that's part of your problem, because I know we've addressed this in the past and we were like, okay, we're low. And just to be frank, I mean, you're paying your lifeguards $10.70 an hour, I think, $10.20 an hour. Ann Arbor's paying $17 an hour. I mean, I don't know how you're going to compete with that unless you're going to raise your salaries for them. So are you going to look at doing that kind of a bump, or are you going to look at a staffing shortfall? I guess trying to figure out where you're going to meet in the middle on that.
Right. So we have a part-time wage kind of calculation that we're definitely paying above the minimum wage to compete with $17 an hour. I mean, unless we have a huge influx of revenue from somewhere, I don't see how we could pay that much.
No, I know, and that's what I'm trying to figure out. Is there something that we can do to offset? Is there anything that we can do? because I know that's been the ongoing issue with the pool, and is that there isn't lifeguards to have it open all of the
Well,
time.
so lifeguards, that's a completely different animal. That's not because of a wage. It's a nationwide phenomenon. There are no lifeguards. People don't want to be lifeguards. We're having this discussion with the American Red Cross. I posed to them that it's their problem as well as our problem, and they need to figure out how we can get lifeguards trained, how we can get people to want to be lifeguards again. It's similar, Marlene and I had this conversation, it's similar to people not wanting to be police officers. It's a responsibility issue. But that, kind of set that aside, we are having a hard time attracting like front desk staff, building supervisors for evenings and weekends. People don't want to work after 6 o'clock at night. Weekends, it's a different thing that's happening right now. So trying to attract someone to work early morning is really difficult because, 10 to 2 is when I want to work.
With an hour for
And
lunch.
we have a lot of people working 10 to 2. We have those people. We need all the other hours.
No, I appreciate that. I just want to make sure that we're looking at that because, that might have to be an overall plan because the follow-up to that was sort of your kids' camp. It's great that you're sold out. Are you going to be able to find adequate staff to run that full program? And so, that's the piece right now. I don't want to sell a product that we may not be able to actually provide the service for. So looking ahead to that. So currently, are your ADA doors not working?
We have one that we just got the replacement part, I think last Thursday, but they're aged. We've had ADA door openers for 20 years now. We've had to replace them. We have some that we want to add. We don't have them on like our locker room doors, so that's 2 doors, one on the front, one on the pool side. And then we do have one that is not currently working. The replacement parts are almost as expensive as buying a brand-new one. So we just need to overhaul all of our ADA door openers.
Right. No, and I see that as a priority because there are a lot of people that come in there. I know I was there the other day and, me with my wagon, hauling all my stuff into the rec center and not having a door that automatically opened was quite a hassle. And then you look at families with, holding kids and swim bags and everything like that, and that's not even somebody with a mobility issue. It's just more of a convenience, and it wasn't available. And so I would like to find, I'm hoping that there is some sort of a funding source to make sure that those can be taken care of on a regular basis. And then as far as, so I really appreciate, I think it's great that it does seem like, your event the other day, that it does seem like people are re-engaging, and I can see that there was a lot more people coming for the pools and the parties and all of that. Life is sort of getting back to normal. So I'm glad to see those numbers are on the up for you. Again, it just comes down to that staffing and whether or not you're going to be overwhelmed by the current staff you have or be understaffed, and I'm not sure that's the right thing either. I think it's great that you're finally seeing some CARES grants coming out. I'd love to see more of those, and that's not on your part. I think that there's a huge contribution, and we kind of get a very small slice of that pie back when, big part of that CARES is recreation.
And just so you know, they are still limiting, the max you can get is 15,000. So they have kind of limited how much you can request. So we try to maximize as much as we can.
Is that per grant, or is that?
Per grant,
Oh, per
yes.
grant, okay.
So, good to see. The one thing that just sort of stuck out, and it's a very nominal number, but I just wasn't sure what it meant. The very first item under revenue says penalties.
Those, as I understand it, so like when we invoice for certain things, like say, what do we invoice for? A softball sign. like say we're invoicing, someone for something. They don't pay it on time, there's a penalty. And until they pay it, they get penalized for not paying it on time. And once they pay it, then they pay the penalties, it goes into this line.
Okay.
I got to stop you there.
Yep, that's fine.
Yeah. Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem Dillon. Mr. CEO, any questions for Director Scruggs or Deputy Director Lambert?
Yes, Your Honor. You say you have 4 personal trainers now?
Yes, we have 4 personal trainers. I think 2 female and 2 male.
Very good. What does a person who is using their services get charged per hour?
I'll tell you in a moment. But one thing we're really excited about is that they're all different. Like one has a lot of experience with just functional, like getting, I want to, be able to get out of bed in the morning. So like working with some older folks, kind of functional, not old. Functional mobility, things like that. We have another one that actually has a little bit of experience with adapted, it's like people in wheelchairs and just wanting to build up arm strength and whatnot.
Oh, it's,
Do we have the prices on
yeah, but it's acting all funny.
that? Okay, so our prices for a member is $60, and it's an hour session. Non-members is $75.
Okay.
Then we
Now,
also-
that's regardless of their expertise?
Yes.
Yeah, that's regardless. And we did when we reviewed these numbers, we did a pretty extensive survey of both private and public fitness facilities just to see what those going rates were. So I think this is really quite a reasonable, fair
Okay.
rate. Yep.
Very good. That's all I have. Thank you, Your Honor.
Easy enough. Thank you, Mr. CEO. Councilmember Kamir Sulek, you have 5 minutes.
Yes. So approximately how many new memberships, whether it's annual or monthly, would it take to break even?
I don't know if I can answer that. I don't think I can answer that right off the cuff. Yeah,
Yeah, that's fine.
I'd be happy to try to do the calculation for you.
I mean, I like the trajectory that you're getting to, and people are visiting and working out and taking advantage of the rec center. I don't understand why there's not more soccer fees, but but that's really all that I have at this point. I think you're doing a wonderful job from where we were,
Thank you.
COVID.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Very good. Thank you, Mr. Kamir Sulek. You want to continue? City Manager O'Toole?
I was just going to say, are there any additional questions on rec center before we?
Go ahead.
I was just going to say, you had a long list of capital projects and everything. But those projects will not be covered by revenue coming from.
Correct. Yeah, we, as referenced, in our capital improvement plan, we have identified gaps, we have identified needs, and we have kind of identified things that we will be targeting if the funding allows. Just in the gaps, we have shy of $1 million. Just in the needs, we have 3.6 million. And then there's probably about another 500 to 600,000 in those things that if funding becomes available, we will target.
So the items, just one last question. The items that you mentioned, Carla, in terms of some of the ADA things and whatever, those will be accomplished if we get grant funding for it? Or are
Well,
they partly in your budget that you're presenting here?
I think we definitely are going to apply for the grant, so we're going to try to get as much funding through grant opportunities. It's not going to fund the whole thing. So I think as we're looking at our budget, as we get into, after July and we're moving into a few months and how are we doing, can we afford to do some of those other projects, kind of joining in the grant funding that we have? I think that's the analysis is, can we afford to do these things based on how we're doing currently?
Yeah, Councilmember Camaro Sulak mentioned, there's that $164,000 that would have to be made up, and then you'd have to basically increase that. So I'm looking at, in order for you to have $150,000 a year, you're talking probably about another $300,000 in recurring net gain that you would have to have in order to accomplish a lot of these tasks. So I think that's the number we need to start looking at in terms of CARES millage and in terms of a rec millage, revising that. I'm disappointed that you can only get $15,000 from CARES millage. It again goes back to the restructuring that was done on that penalized the community. So, thank you.
And just on that point, because I've shared this with City Manager O'Toole, I'm not sure I've discussed it with Councilmember Rice, but in my preliminary conversations with Superintendent Lotch and with School Board President McVeigh, as we plan for a future retreat or joint City Council School Board meeting, collaboration and support for the rec center and Parks and Rec more broadly will be an agenda item. That was at the top of my list. So that's absolutely something that needs to be discussed. And to your point, Mr. Gearbaugh, we should and we ought to make progress on deriving more school district support for recreation initiatives at the municipal level. Yeah. Go ahead, real quick, City Manager.
Oh, no.
Okay.
No. So I just wanted to circle back on the publication costs. I know you've got about $20,000, which is, I know that's the going fee for it. I mean, have you done any research? Like, do your flyers just go to residents, city residents, or do they go to the school district?
School district.
Okay. And I mean, personally myself, I feel a little overwhelmed because I get one from you, I get one from Community Ed, I get one from Pittsfield, I get one from Ann Arbor. And it's almost like it's overwhelming. And I guess I'm just trying to figure out, I mean, have you ever surveyed like your people that are signing up? Like, hey, did you see this in the brochure? Or did you just know about it from a flyer? Because I mean, to have paper flyers and brochures at a time when like you have QR codes, I mean, I just wonder how many people, if the catalog's online, you know, what number of people would look there for it versus, you know.
Those are all really good questions. I'll let Sunshine talk, and then I have a couple of points as well.
Yeah, it's hard to say 100%, but I think we're getting people looking at our information. We have people who go online to seek it out. We have people who see it in person because they're current users. So we try to do a lot of internal advertising, whether it's our big TV that's in the hallway that's rotating different events, to flyers in the flyer rack. We work with the schools. We're really fortunate to have that relationship with the schools where we can send flyers out, so that's a nice low-cost way of advertising. But I definitely see a lot of people bringing those brochures. They'll walk into the facility with brochure in hand as they're wanting to, you know, register for our program, or while they call us. I mean, we do witness this. You know, they'll talk about how they're sifting through their brochure and they have some questions, you know, about those programs or the membership. So yeah, I think it's really key to have that publication because all of our competitors, that's coming into their household too. So it's really key that we're on the same, you know, playing field with that.
So 2 points. One, we tried not to have a brochure. Like during COVID, we did not have a brochure. And we directed people online to a virtual brochure that we created. It just wasn't the same. We didn't get the same volume of people registering, and it might have been completely COVID related. We're not sure. But in that being said, your comment about being inundated with, you know, 4 different brochures, that's why we're like working with so Community Ed and Parks and Rec, we have the same brochure printer. So we had a conversation with our printer and said, can we do this? What does it look like? How many pages do we need in order to do it? How, you know, what, you know, they've done it in other communities. He's shown us some examples, and that way we can not inundate people with, you know, too many things. It's, you know, one time, it's for Saline, it's very, you know, there's a lot of things that he suggested we could do to make sure that people understand this is Parks and Rec, and then flip it over, and then this is Community Ed. So I think it's very doable. We're just trying to get the numbers back on, you know, how many pages that we need, how much is it actually going to cost, and then look at mailing costs to evaluate, is this going to be worth it for both of us to do this? So at least a trial.
Thank you.
Would you like to continue?
No, I was just going to suggest, since we've only got about 45 minutes left, if we're ready to move on, if there's additional questions. You know, Director Scruggs is always very responsive. I'd also like to suggest that maybe we, for this conversation at least, just kind of skip the streets portion for now. All of those projects have been discussed previously in our capital improvement plan and will be discussed again.
Yep.
And move instead to use this last 45 minutes for public utilities, water and sewer.
Good. Yep.
So can we make sure we're on the public utilities sewer fund slide, please?
You're going
And I
to start
will-
this one off, Bill? Okay, make sure that microphone is real close to your mouth, and you may begin when ready.
Well, as we all know, the sewer fund is definitely getting some increased revenues because of the, is that working? Because of the SRF debt service materials or the needs that we have. We have had some equipment that has had to be replaced out of reserves because it basically had to be replaced. We need to have it. We can't get along without it. The proceeds from the SRF loan, of course, are going to go to the SRF. We are pulling some funds forward to try and purchase or order things that we need to have as soon as we can get them, and will be reimbursed out of the SRF. The increased cost of the Delpac, we actually got a memo from Du Bois that the cost of Delpac was going to increase. And as it turns out, we got an email from our actual sales rep about a week and a half ago that said we are not going to get the increase in April that was forecasted. Now, that's not to say that if costs go up, they won't be passed on to us. So I would not be surprised to see something, another increase within the next 6 to 12 months from them. We are looking at trying to find other resources for that particular material. And I'm inclined to think that when we get the new system, new wastewater plant up and running, we'll be able to change that formulation a little bit, and then therefore the cost will change, hopefully to the lesser, but no guarantees. The increase, the next line item for cost needed for land application, that because we have a new vendor, is not going to be as needed to be as large an increase. So I would expect to see, stay pretty steady for the next. The interesting thing is that for land application, our contract runs for an annual year as opposed to a fiscal year, so it's kind of hard to get those two to mesh together. But so this year the costs are down from cost per gallon is down, the fuel surcharge is down from the previous supplier, and so for the annual year of 2023, we should see reduced costs in land application unless we have a huge increase in solids disposal. The next two line items on the list there, we have had to invest in facility repair and preventive maintenance. One of the things that wasn't being done previously was preventive maintenance, and for some of those things that we've had to do, we just haven't had the resources to be able to do it. So we're working on amassing the supplies that we need to do the preventive maintenance, grease and other small parts and stuff that we need to keep things going. Facility repairs, we have had, have had some small things done, put some new doors in. Still have a few more to put in the building that we're going to keep. And we're trying to maintain and potentially improve some of our facilities as far as cleaning. We have a situation in the boiler room, the gas room there, that there's probably half a dozen manometers which are in need of replacement. They just haven't been anything done with them for who knows how long. So, and I haven't even begun to figure out how much that is. I wouldn't think they'd be that expensive, but
Larry? Mr. Searles?
Well, the main, the main line item in there for collection is the rehabilitation investment in our sanitary manholes and structures. That will ultimately, well, A, keep us from having to do emergency repairs. Obviously, we don't want to see backups, and also provide more, less ground and surface water in the system that gets to the plant. And the East Belt portion of our capital project is also in that fund that we're talking about.
Very good. City Manager O'Toole, anything you'd like to add?
No, just the other items that you'll see, the other items that you'll see are just related to capital improvement projects. So again, certainly we'll have more time to talk about those projects specifically.
And I shared this with the city manager earlier today. While not exactly applicable to this conversation, I am pleased to report that Congresswoman Dingle called me this morning, and Saline's request for $5 million for wastewater, our wastewater treatment plant rehabilitation is now number one on her community impact project list, which is great news. So as you'll recall from a previous communique from the city manager, each member of the United States House of Representatives can submit up to 15 projects in order of importance. So good news today that ours is number one on her list.
So would we like to move into drinking water or do questions?
No, let's wrap it up. Wrap up the presentation portion, then we'll do questions. We'll probably have time for maybe even 2 rounds of questions. So, Mr. Briggs, Superintendent Briggs, if you'd like to continue on the drinking water front, that would be great.
Certainly. So we are doing a better job of replacing equipment, using some reserve funds that have been available and kind of squirreled away in the past. So we are using some of those funds to address things at the drinking water plant. We're doing a much better job of purchasing required equipment for pumps for chemicals, things like that, that people were just not want to do in the past. I didn't want to spend the money to get the best pump, but we're trying to do the best we can now. So, because the drinking water is obviously a huge issue for the people of Saline, so we want to do that properly. There were costs associated with well number 7. Those are still going to be ongoing. I don't know, Al, is that those costs bundle in what happened with well 4 in that too, or are they? Yeah, okay. So, of course, we had well 4. We put some money into well 4, hoping we could restore it, and that failed. So, unfortunately, that money is water under the bridge, so to speak.
Water under the ground.
So we have a cost for well 7. It's really not that bad. I thought it was pretty reasonable, actually. So we're still waiting on the Eagle to get us affirmation that we can go ahead and start drilling that well. I'm not sure what the holdup is, but we're waiting.
Where is that going to be, Bill?
That's actually going to be just off of where well 4 is now. It will be off to get my bearings, to the north, I believe.
Correct.
A little bit. In the same, it's only going to be about 15, 20 yards from where the well 4 is right now.
Down on Waterworks?
Yes.
Okay.
Inside the fence. There. So the repair and replacement projects and maintenance at the water plant, we have several things ongoing there. The prospect of doing the iron filters. I had an email today from Tom Rounds at Dixon to give him a call. I haven't had a chance to do that. We'll go over the bid packet so we can get that out. Hopefully we can start. That money is in the budget to do that, to repair anything that's broken on them, replace the sand filter, the green sand in them, and also to replace some valves. You already approved that on the end of the filters to make sure that they function after we get them refurbished. We've also got some, I'll be coming to council on Monday night for some replacing the filter media in one of the ROs. When we were having problems with supply chains, the pre-filters for the actual filters themselves that go in the pre-filters for the ROs, we were running short on those, and our supplier said, well, I have these from another manufacturer that are just like these, and they'll work. Well, they weren't, and they didn't work nearly as well. So we believe some of the material that the filters are supposed to stop actually got to the RO membranes and plugged them off. So we've tried to clean and place those particular membranes probably at least 3 or 4 times since last fall, and they'll last for about a month, and then we'll have to be a month and a half, 2 months, we'll be after it again. So instead of spending that time and energy, we're going to go ahead. These membranes have a lifespan of about 3 to 5 years. So they're at least 3 years old. I'd have to look at one of them's a little older than the other. I couldn't remember which one's which, but right now. But they're definitely to the point where we can replace them and not hurt anything. So we'll get that, like I said, I'd like to get that started up and get that done as soon as possible. Non-reserve funded repair and maintenance projects. I'm not sure exactly what a lot of those are just the normal repair and maintenance things that we have going on at the water plant. You say normal, but there's always stuff that can be done down there. The guys done a really good job of, they had a dumpster down there, they were cleaning a bunch of stuff out that's sitting on shelves for years and throwing things away that were worthless and making the place look a lot better. So I think they're kind of proud of the way it looks now. We still have a little work to do. I'd like to do some painting down there on some of that stuff. That's probably more of a winter project than a summer project. In the summer, you get a lot of condensation, moisture, it's hard to paint.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Let's see what else. Power main lining, you want to talk about that?
I don't know. Tasha, did you want to chat too about the valve replacement?
It's valve, right, not value?
Ah,
Yeah,
yes.
that's a typo.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm good with value replacement, too.
I was going to say, what valves are we replacing? We're looking for valves. We've made a lot of progress on that.
I was gonna save us $37,000 by eliminating that from the line items, because as we updated our GIS, we found out there was a lot of valves on a system map that didn't exist in the system. We had a contract for valve assessment. As it turns out, we're down to about 15 unknown? So we won't be going through round 2 and 3 of that. We're just
That's
gonna
excellent news.
Wipe it out.
Very good.
And we were at about 100, when we did the first round, we had over 100 unknown. Of course, some of those went away, but we had almost 150 unknown valves, and that was an overwhelming list in August. And we've now knocked it down to 18.
And when do you think you'll wrap that up?
Well, we actually have a good idea. We're aiming for the end of this fiscal year for the valves, to
Okay.
get them located out in the field. And we got to go dig a few up now and look for them.
Good. Larry, Tasha, anything else you want to add more broadly to drinking water? No? Okay. City Manager O'Toole, anything else?
I'll just note that for the fiscal year we're currently sitting in, we are projecting that there will be use of fund balance, but if you recall, that was brought to council and approved as part of installing well number 7. So all in all, we still view the fund as healthy.
Good. Okay. Excellent. Councilmember Rice, can I start with you? We'll at least have around, or you'll at least have opportunity for two rounds of questions. So would you like to begin with 5 minutes?
Sure, thank you. Not getting into the fine details, but just perhaps a broad question about rates and how we feel about where we're at with rates and when we're going to do the second round of the study. Do we anticipate rates will need to go up to continue to fulfill some of these obligations and these projects that we're working on?
So the original rate study that we did project that we would continue to see rate increases over the next 5 years. It also recommended, just broadly speaking, that the city needed to be more consistent in increasing its rates annually to keep up with the cost of inflation. We are waiting until we get the bid documents back so we know actual numbers for the wastewater treatment plant rehabilitation project. Because as you can imagine, the debt service on that is really the big outstanding piece. The rest of these projects we have a fairly good understanding of. They're small scale enough that we feel comfortable with the ranges that we're projecting, and we can build around that. But once we have that piece of the puzzle, Baker Tilly will perform its second rate study for us and give a recommendation for rates that would become effective December 1.
Thank you for that. And is it safe to assume the more federal/state funding we get, the
Absolutely.
more likely we are to be able to balance that out?
Absolutely, yes, yeah.
So,
If we got $5 million in support from the federal government, that would go directly to reducing what that expected increase needs to be.
great, thank you for that. So again, a plug for anyone and everyone to contact their representatives to make sure that we're, getting our fair share of all the funding that's out there and that's available.
And if I may, real quick, Councilmember Rice, this won't detract from your time, but as soon as we receive confirmation from our state officials, Senator Irwin and Braybeck, in terms of what their specific ask is going to be, we'll be encouraging people to reach out to them and to other members of the state legislature, encouraging that a direct appropriation be approved as well.
Wonderful, thank you. That's all I have for now. Thanks.
Easy enough. Mr. Gearbaugh, you have 5 minutes.
When we look at this, unfortunately, when you look at this budget model and the way it's presented, you have all this one-time stuff going in there versus operating and things. I don't know if we can present something to understand what operating is versus construction for the next few years. Just an observation, just wondering how we would present that. Do we see any shortfall concerns right now that you just said that you feel that we're good in terms of any issues right now?
No, I think we're in a good position, especially with securing the SRF funding. We're very, confident that we'll be able to piece together a project with that funding figure, and certainly if we have additional state or federal support to offset that, then turning that into more nominal rate increases over time instead of these dramatic rate increases. But as far as the capital projects we have and what we see on the horizon, really the biggest gap is just going after bonds for those things. But when we did the original rate studies, we anticipated additional financing beyond just the SRF we have now. So that's going to be just a normal part of our process moving forward, is making sure that we're staying ahead of ourselves instead of being reactive to our financing needs, planning for our financing needs.
So if we anticipated this is hopefully not Bill, but we seem like we identify something every couple months. So if we identified a $250,000 problem to keep the plant running, do we have sufficient?
Yes, we have sufficient reserves for that kind of response, yeah.
Then the only other thing is, did we ever establish what would be a reasonable budget for the preventative maintenance that we need to maintain? Or have we done that, or anything in terms of using the operation manual, or will that be after we have the new plant?
So that's something we'll want to talk about again after the operations and maintenance manual is complete. When we did the first run of the rate study, Baker Tilly suggested $250,000 a year go into the capital reserves to offset what they anticipated would be future drawdowns from it.
Okay. I didn't know if we needed to adjust that or any more to understand that. Then just kind of looking at rate increases, I see looking at the sale of sewer, it's approximately a 33% increase. But I look at the sale of water and it's only a 3% increase. How do we calculate those? Do we have a volume change or?
No, again, so the sewer rate's going to be entirely driven on what comes out of the federal funding we get, the final numbers on the bids for the rehabilitation project. Water, again, you feel that fund is in a very healthy position. We're just talking about nominal increases, like 3% to keep up with inflation every year.
Right, I was just looking at from year to year, but 3%, was that our actual increase that we did for water?
This
I thought it was
past
higher
year,
than
no,
that.
we had a
Yeah,
little
I
bit
thought it
more
was
of
like
a
25.
catch-up.
Yeah, so I wasn't sure what our volume and how that number was calculated, so. For me, looking at it, I thought that number would be significantly higher. There may be formula reasoning behind it, I just don't understand.
Yeah, there are certain fixed costs to the bill, and then there's usage costs, and the fixed costs didn't increase as much as the usage charges did. So that's all combined together in that rate. So it kind of evened out, in addition to the fact that, we're lagging a little bit with our rates. We're always, billing quarterly, it kind of puts us behind a little bit. So you probably will see that kind of catch up more towards year end when we have all of those bills finally out, and then we make adjustments for year-end entries to account for those.
Thank you.
Anything else, Mr. Gilbo? Okay. Councilmember Mayor Pro Tem Dillon, you have 5 minutes.
Thank you. I just wanted to make mention of kudos to staff. When you look at the line items on both the sewer fund and the drinking water fund for interest, I mean, just on interest on the sewer fund, we went from 15,000 to 150,000, which is obviously beyond, magnificent. But with that, it's like, that is a lot of found money that's now just poof, absorbed. That makes me a little concerned. That, where would we have been in a shortfall situation without this? And I was hoping that some of those dollars were going to go kind of start building up our fund balance. When we initially talked about these things, it was like, okay, these are, when we looked at ways to do fund balance, and I thought that was something, but it's really just getting absorbed into the budget, and that makes me a little bit concerned at this point, that where are we and how are we going to rebuild our fund balance if we're taking all these dollars, these newfound dollars, and they're just going right back into the budget?
So I do want to point out that in both the water and sewer fund, we are making substantial contributions to our capital reserve fund. So those, yes, new dollars are coming in, but the city this fiscal year, has contributed more to those reserves than ever before.
Okay.
And now with the rate study, we are following that plan of, in the future years, contributing at least $250,000. So our drawdown will always be less than our contribution to keep that balance healthy.
Okay. No, I appreciate that. Like I said, I mean, it's just,
Oh, yeah.
I don't know where we would have been without finding those dollars, and I appreciate Treasurer Cole making that effort. It's a shame that we weren't able to recognize this opportunity sooner. Better late than never, I guess, and moving forward. Is this something that we're going to look at as sort of a year-over-year benefit?
It all depends on the interest rates, correct? So as the market fluctuates,
balance.
the
Yeah.
interest is going to fluctuate. But yeah, this is, something that I would see more consistent balances throughout the years going forward.
Okay. Because, I'm hoping that, because it is across other funds, obviously, too, is that we do figure out a way that we can earmark those dollars into, unassigned fund balances and things like that, or some of these other funds that we're creating, whether it's the equipment fund or something like that, so that we're building them up. Because I just don't want to see it just absorbed right into a budget and just as a pass-through.
And just for your information too, when we sent out the budget, I included our capital contributions so that you can see we are building up that capital replacement fund in quite a substantial way. So that is helping build up those balances and keep those reserve amounts, even though it's not part of fund balance technically, but we have built up those reserve balances. So take a peek at those schedules that I sent out, and I'd be happy to sit down and meet with you and talk about some.
Absolutely, I really appreciate that. And I think that Mr. Gearbaugh touched on my other question, which was that I do know that basically it seems like at every meeting, we've got some sort of issue that comes up with the water treatment plant, and it's taken from the sewer fund. And I always get nervous, and I know I've asked a couple of times, like, when's that well going to run dry? And so just making sure that there is like that rainy day fund in there, that, because it does seem like there is always the what is it next?
Yeah, so for reference, for this fiscal year end, we're projecting about 1.9 million in the what we call working capital for the for the water fund, and then I'll pull up the sewer fund real quick here. And that's not the capital reserve fund for them either. That's just the working capital, what we would call unassigned fund balance in the general fund. And then on the sewer side, we're projecting for this fiscal year end 2.1 million in working capital.
Which sounds phenomenal, and it is. It's kudos for making that happen. I just know that most of Mr. Briggs' purchases are big-ticket items, so I can see that money going very
Mr. Briggs
quickly.
spends a lot of time with me and Elle talking about his budget.
Okay. My only last question is regarding kind of, I saw it earlier in a line item, was like Rosebud. So have we created a policy of special assessments when we have issues that come up like that, so we don't have another $500,000 draw?
We have not created an official policy, but one, we have an internal direction that if that happens again, one, it would at least be financed and come to council for a conversation. But the more important thing is what you will see in the FY24 budget, which is actually a comprehensive assessment of the conditions, so we're not caught off guard by these things again.
Thank you very much.
Very good. Mr. Sealer, Councilmember Sealer, you have 5 minutes.
Thank you, Your Honor. This question might sound like it's out of left field, but it goes to our current budget discussion, I think. How are we doing with our present water meter installation program?
We have less than 200 now to go. We're at a point where we're going to roll out the opt-out rules, where if people don't want to get their meter changed, you know, they have to pay for us to come out and get the reads manually still. I think the program went well, and I think in the near future, we'll have probably, if council wants, a detailed report of how that project went, timelines and everything. Because I know we took some punches about
Right.
appointments.
There is also in the council share drive, start to finish, all of the meters that are out there still remaining, letters that we've sent to residents, copy of those. Obviously, council previously took action to add the $75 fee charge to quarterly billing for those who do not opt in to the program. That'll be taking effect this upcoming quarter. We are really trying to push to get those last 200 onto the system. You know, some of them have reasons for not wanting to comply, and we'll do our best to work with them, but they're going to need to self-report in the future to make sure that we're getting an accurate recording, because we can't give them preferential billing treatment.
Wasn't part of the issue with the outstanding homes, businesses that needed to be replaced is that you didn't have the equipment?
There was a short pause on moving forward with the program as we were short on meters.
Okay.
We had new construction come up, and we actually used the meter sort of program for the new construction without thinking about it and having a supply. We have no supply issue with our meters right now. We have enough meters for every one of our customers.
Okay.
All right, well, the reason I was asking that question was, originally, when we talked about beginning the program, we said we thought there was X% of error in the old meters. Has that been borne out? I know we just sent out recently a new water billing, because I wrote a check. So have we shown that these new meters are more efficient, more effective?
Well, yeah, we haven't went a full calendar
Okay.
to get a representative, you know, like summer and winter, a huge difference.
Okay.
But I think a consumption report is in order as soon as we get a full set of data.
Okay. That was the only question I had. Wondering if we had discovered any new source of revenue on the water and sewer side as a result of these meters.
Thank you, Mr. Seal.
We did find a few secondary meters that were properly accounted for.
Oh, interesting. Okay. Mr. Kamara-Sulak, you have 5 minutes?
Yes. So you gave some numbers, 2.1 million, that was what fund was that?
That's sewer.
That's sewer, and then what was the water? Okay, and then where will our reserve fund balance be at this point with this budget? What
For water and sewer?
No, just overall.
I guess I don't fully understand the question. So for the coming year's budgets?
Yeah, because we want to have a 15%
Oh,
fund reserve.
general fund.
Yeah,
We don't have the same policy for the water and sewer funds that we do for the general fund. It's just a general fund balance policy of 15%. So if nothing, this is what I was talking about, so if nothing changes, we're gonna be using about $270,000 in general funds currently unassigned fund balance to make FY '24 balance. That's obviously not our intent. We don't wanna have to use that, because as we know, we're already under that 15% threshold, so that's not gonna really help us. Now, this current year, we are projecting, November 1, he's spending so much money, we are projecting to add to our fund. It's not my general fund problem. We are projecting to add to the fund balance around $300,000 for FY '23, but then we'd wipe it right out if we do nothing for FY '24.
Okay.
So that's why we're saying we need to continue that conversation around making substantive operational changes that will put us on the right trajectory long term. Because I will tell you, part of that savings for this fiscal year was us saying we just can't do everything that we need to do. For example, storms, we've just been historically disinvesting in storm sewers because there hasn't been general fund dollars allocated to it.
And there's no support from the state or federal government.
I can just add briefly too that our general fund balance, the goal for 15% would be $1.933 million approximately. That would
Okay.
be the goal number.
And we'll
Okay.
be at the end of this fiscal year around 1.7.
Okay,
So we're moving closer, but we got to keep on that trajectory.
right, exactly. Well, thank you. That's all I have. That's better news than I thought.
Before we wrap up, City Manager O'Toole or Treasurer Cole, any final comments?
No, I'll just say, we can, if council wants, we can bring back the other funds that we didn't talk about tonight at a work meeting, or we can, if you have any questions about what was contained in the presentation, you're just welcome to reach out to myself and Treasurer Cole.
So or maybe this is a question for Clerk Royal. We have a work meeting in advance of our next council meeting?
Yes.
Which is on, remind me of the topic,
Design, engineering design standards.
okay? So we would likely need to schedule a special meeting then.
We have a budget workshop scheduled for the first meeting. What's the one with for the millage?
That is the first meeting in May, yes.
Correct. So we currently have a work session scheduled, is that at May 1st, is that 5:30 or 6? Starting at 5:30. We're actually talking internally that we probably don't need that amount of time for the millage discussion. So if we wanted to carry some of this forward to that conversation, we could easily do
And what's the millage discussion specifically?
It's just the,
that. It's just the setting of the millage rate for the year, based on general fund needs.
And we're going to have a work meeting at 5:30 to this?
That's,
I think that's what I usually do.
We've never done that before.
yeah, it's-
I don't know why I would need a work meeting.
yeah, I'd rather have
on
it
the
for the budget. I didn't, yeah, we never have really talked about setting the millage. We always talk about the budget.
Yeah, the budget, obviously, whatever we
Well, we
decide as
already-
budget priorities
yes, yeah.
dictates the millage rate, of
yeah.
course.
So, well, we already have something on the books for May 1st, so.
So is that too late, or are people good with 5:30 on the 1st?
That's fine with me.
Okay? All right, in the interim, of course, if you have questions,
Frankly,
please.
by that time, we should have a pretty darn near complete budget, and then any of these outstanding, we would just really have the LDFA, TIFA, EDC, and fire services to go through.
Okay, all right, very good. We can get that done in an hour. Okay.
And I would encourage and urge you, if you have any questions as you look through the budget, to please get in contact with Colleen, myself, so that we can make those adjustments and answer those questions prior to the next meeting.
Very good. Are there any very time-sensitive, important questions before we wrap up here? No? Okay.
Motion to adjourn?
That is in order, Mr. CEO, at 5:50 PM. Is there a second to that motion?
Second.
Seconded by Gearball. All those in favor of adjourning this special budget meeting signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, say nay. Ayes have it. Meeting is adjourned. Have a wonderful evening.
Thank you, staff.
Thank you.
Thank you.